land, and they were parked out in a farmer's field, and the Hutterites and Mennonites and the Amish have actually been setting up tents along the way for them.
Oh, wow.
And feeding everybody. And yeah, when they rolled out of there, they got on the far side of Winnipeg on the ring road. There was 24 miles of people parked on both sides of the road, too deep, too wide. And but the actual number of trucks is around 1,200 based on a couple of different people that have actually paid attention. So it's pretty interesting. Unfortunately, I think that it's lost what it really was supposed to be. Like it started out about the cross-border vaccination stuff, and now it's just a protest.
I don't think it's lost any of that at all. Not
it's
the people that
picked up way too much. It's not. It doesn't have one message anymore.
it does actually have a message. They have posted what the messages are. It has one direct message. They've written it out exactly what they're going there for. So I don't think it's lost any. I think it's picked momentum. It's just attracted a lot of people worldwide.
Oh, it has that.
Well, I think there's even Americans coming up supposedly to support him.
The reason they had to go to the field plowed out because they're supposed to go into the Flying J and the RCMP.
Well, there's no room for them. There's 1,200 trucks, so they're not going to.
Well, the Hutterites were there. I know I have family and friends that are in it too. And they were supposed to go in there and the RCMP blocked it off. So then they had to read the Hutterites. There was 27 colonies.
Wow.
The food was unbelievable.
Yeah.
But they just said baskets and baskets of food.
Lots of trucks jumping in and jumping out, going a couple hundred miles, then bailing out of it. Next, somebody else makes it. Two trucks coming out of Smithers, BC, that were late started, so they're trying to catch them. And following, it's two ladies in a Smithers, and they've actually got an interesting feed going on that they update every couple of hours. They actually bought the truck to join this. They're about a day behind, but they should catch them tonight if everything goes according to plan. So
Driving all hours.
they just rolled out of Kenora this morning. So
If anything, it's bringing people together
oh, it is. That's the best part of it all.
and with the support. And all that, so.
Is that good?
Oh, I can't connect to the stuff.
I can't either. I'm flatlined. What if my phone will?
You
I
can
can't-
connect to the guests though.
I can't get in on there either.
Well, you have to open up a browser once you connect to the
I
guest
did,
one,
but I can't.
and then it'll take you to the little splash page. And if you just open up a browser now, it should prompt you for the guest access or the code.
So it's up
your
to you,
email won't
Mr.
work
Mayor,
if
if you want to
But I
start.
I think we can start.
So what do I?
Call it to order at 8:39.
Just open up a new tab or something. Just browse to the website somewhere.
Everyone's had a chance to see the agenda.
Or you just open in the browser.
Motions that can.
Yeah.
Mr. Campion or Council Champion going to John Duffy. Agenda is presented. All in favor? Carried.
So, Mr. Mayor, with 3.1, just a little bit of a background to it. So we do have Jennifer and Paul on Zoom from 818 Studios. So they were retained by Harvest Sky probably a year ago to focus on a few projects, one of them being the Hannah Community Development Plan. So the previous council has seen it. It'll be definitely a review for them. But I did want to get Jennifer and Paul in front of the new counselors to provide them with an update as to where they came from, what they did, the process they used, kind of where they ended up, and the report is final. So the previous council did have a priority to rejuvenate our downtown core. They wanted it to be an attractive place that would attract businesses, would attract people, and really wanted to put an emphasis on that. So that was one of the reasons that 818 was retained to do their work. So after Jen and Paul have provided their update and answered any questions council may have, I can provide an update as to where the status of where the project is, where it's at, and the next steps. So with that, Mr. Mayor, if you we just want to turn it over to
Yeah.
Jen and Paul, and
Jen and Paul, how
and-
about her?
it's your show.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm gonna share my screen. Oh, somebody needs to allow me to share the screen. There we go, thank you. Okay. So everybody can see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. So as Kim had mentioned, the Hannah Community Development Project was undertaken in 2021 and funded by Harvest Sky Economic Development Corporation. It positions Hannah well to take advantage of any grants that may become available because it provides sort of a master plan, high level idea of projects that can be taken with funding dollars. So the final report includes 3 plans: the Main Street Revitalization, Community Streetscape Plan, and Signage and Wayfinding. It also includes the project documents that support those plans, that include the context review, an engagement, what we heard, design guidelines, and then implementation plans and cost estimates. And today I'm just going to provide a brief overview of the supporting documents and a little bit more detail on the actual plans. Implementation of the community development project plans are going to rely on a framework for success. So the first is community development. We recommend that the town should dedicate resources and create a portfolio, coordinate and provide leadership and organization development opportunities. This portfolio would be responsible for the capital development program, development improvement policy, and funding. A benefit would be to create synergies with organizations with complementary missions in order to achieve common objectives. And the second is community collaboration, which is formalizing partnerships and activities between the town staff and like-minded organizations such as the Chamber of Commerce, Harvest Sky, and downtown businesses in order to be able to effectively implement these 3 plans. So the phased implementation refers to the Main Street Revitalization is suggested in stages so that as funding becomes available, it can be implemented in a way that makes sense, either block by block or all at once, but different stages. So the first stage across all of Main Street, and then the second stage or block by block, as I mentioned, and it makes the best use of grant funding that becomes available. The community streetscape improvements are recommended on a project basis as grant becomes available or as infrastructure is up for renewal in the capital program. Also, community members can come forward and suggest a project that they would like have implemented on their street. And finally, the signage and wayfinding is recommended as comprehensive implementation because it all does work together to create a cohesive wayfinding strategy to make the town signage legible and cohesive. And it actually provides an opportunity as well to explore partnerships. First of all, I'll talk about the planning context for the community development project as a whole. Reviewing documents really set the stage for the project. A lot of them included ideas for how the future can be made better as Hannah transitions from a resource-based economy into something different. And they identified opportunities for economic development that we identified within our plans. And now a bit of, I guess, placemaking, planning context. So these are some of the best practices for placemaking. It's to capitalize on the sense of place, include beautification elements, really look at gateways, because those are the what visitors are going to see as they're passing by, and beautiful gateways will bring people into the community and provide gathering spaces. And that was actually rather strongly heard during the engagement, that it was important to have gathering places. So these best practices attract residents and visitors and provide a framework for analysis and design concepts later on. Just to clarify what sense of place means, it is a planning and landscape architecture term. And it's what makes the community unique. So in Hannah, when we spoke with council about a year ago, the indication was that the sense of place that Hannah had was modern agricultural. It's also based on what's physically there right now in the buildings. So how the buildings look downtown. And when we went and asked the youth about sense of place, they talked about how Hannah is a very friendly community. And it's what should be celebrated in anything. So to really convey what Hannah means to its residents and transmit that information to visitors who come to the town. So for our engagement process, we spoke with downtown business owners through surveys and interviews. We reached out to the students at the school to find out about sense of place and about gateways to Hannah. We attended the Mother's Day Farmers Market in May, and then 4 farmers markets in June. We set up our booth and panels and got feedback on those. We had a storefront beside the post office where people were invited to drop in and look at the panels and have a discussion with Paul or myself. And we gave the engagement panels to Hannah Lodge and had the seniors, the residents and staff provide feedback. So for Main Street, our observations were that the Main Street extends 3 blocks and there's a transition zone between Palliser and Pioneer Trails that's not quite residential, not quite business, but a mix of the both. Downtown has very active frontages. The buildings are placed directly adjacent to the sidewalk, which allows passersby to look in the windows and create an engagement with what's going on inside, pique their interest. As I mentioned, the downtown has a very specific look and feel. There are these, several of the buildings have a little bit of a diagonal front window, which I haven't seen in other towns across Alberta. So that's part of what makes Hannah unique and contributes to its sense of place. And there are these, there's some what we call tactical urbanism. The business owners have put out unique benches, character benches that invite people to stop and gather, and it really contributes to the, I guess, the attractiveness of downtown. The I wanted to define what streetscape means. It actually is from building edge to building edge. So anything that is outside of the buildings is part of the public space, including planters, lights, the width of the sidewalk contributes to the streetscape. The curbs, if there's a scooter lane or anything, and gathering areas, that's all part of streetscape. In Main Street, most of the sidewalks are rather narrow, but they open up into some wider areas that can be used for gathering areas. One thing I'm noticing about this picture is the scale of the planters. They're, looking at the streetscape as a whole, they're rather small. And so perhaps the addition of larger planters can be a bit more noticeable. Lighting too contributes to the pedestrian atmosphere and attracting people to the downtown area. Downtown, we've got these large Cobra style streetlights that are really directed towards making traffic safer, not for pedestrians. Whereas you have in Memorial Park, this is a pedestrian scale lighting, which is, it's a little nicer to look at, it's lower down, so it really provides lights for the pedestrians. So taking all the information that we learned from the site analysis, we designed some options for what the Main Street streetscape could look like, and we took these out to engagement. I'm sure everybody will remember there was a hue and cry about some of the options. Certainly option 3, which was maintaining the angle parking, was the preferred option. So at the May Farmers Market, we had these 3 options and noticed that really everybody was saying angle parking is the only way to go. So we did break down for all the future engagement, option 3, and to find out what are elements people really wanted, really liked about this. Was it just the angle parking, or were there other things? And so we did see that gathering areas are quite something that people would like to see downtown, as well as street trees. And people preferred a low rolled curb for the downtown area, which actually makes it easier to open up the street for markets if you wanted to close it off for traffic, and then you sort of remove the tripping hazard. And it does make it easier for wheeled vehicles to get around. Mid-block crossings, although they didn't get a large number of appeal or approval. There is already a mid-block crossing, as you know, near the Legion, and there's no reason why it should be removed, just because it didn't get a lot of votes. And indeed, perhaps mid-block crossings are a good thing, because sometimes people don't like things, and then when you test them out and you see, then people will see their usefulness. So after all of the engagement and the site analysis, we came up with the Main Street final development plan. I know it's rather small. I'll just point out a few things. Kim had talked about activation and bringing people downtown. So we do recommend a stage. I know that there has been a stage that can be put up and put down, but something a little bit bigger and more permanent, perhaps. That can be put in an empty lot until it has been built on, and then maybe moved somewhere else. We've got the bump outs just at the intersections to maintain the angle parking along the streets, adding some angle parking along McCrae Drive in order to take or to replace some of the angle parking that would be lost by the intersection bump outs. And now, because this is such a small image, to illustrate the stages, we'll talk about the stages first here. So we're recommending a staged approach. Because understanding that the Main Street utilities, water mains are going to be replaced at some point, it doesn't make sense to build a lot of infrastructure and then have it torn out. So the first stage is a testing stage, which is the use of temporary barriers to create bump outs and gathering areas. So this would include a purchase of site furniture, and at this point that site furniture collection can be evaluated for whether people like it, and then you can test the number of bump outs, where the gathering areas are located, how many gathering areas there are. So there can be a lot of information gathering during this phase, which would really set the stage for once the Main Street utilities have been replaced, then new sidewalks are implemented, then intersection bump outs can be installed, and people will be used to them by that point and will be used to using them. And then at the same point, installation of lighting and street trees and site furniture would happen. The site furniture from the first phase plus extra site furniture. And then the third stage is enhancement, which is just additional site furniture to promote gathering and activity, and then drawing the elements that make Main Street down the side streets to the first alley in order to make it really visible from within the residential areas that that's where Main Street is. So here's an example of the staged approach, staged at the intersection of Main Street and First Street. The yellow is the bump outs testing. So it would be painted. You could have those plastic delineators set up. There are some planters that can be used as a buffer between the pedestrians and the traffic. And then the implementation of dedicated accessible stalls with little with ramps to get up onto the sidewalks. And then here's site furniture gathering area with benches, tables, and then a wind screen as well. Stage 2 would be post Main Street utility upgrades. So actually concrete bump outs with another gathering area, set of furniture installed here, additional planters, a bike rack or two, and curb cuts to when the sidewalk is put in to make sure that the accessible parking stalls are truly accessible. And then stage 3 would be the enhancement stage, where things are added down the streets, additional site furniture in the forms here of planting and some picnic tables and bench, and then lighting as well down the street. So getting to, oh, that did not work. Stage 4, which is full build out. You can see all of the 4 intersection bump outs, if that is indeed what the town has decided to go ahead with. And then here there's some street art in the middle. One of the questions that council had last year was for trucks turning in the downtown, because there are delivery trucks that need to come by. What's been done here is that the stop line on the streets is far enough back so that when a truck does come, it can swing out into the intersection and then into its lane without actually encroaching on the oncoming traffic. The Main Street gathering areas. I clicked and it did not, there we go, oh, no. The Main Street gathering areas, this is just a quick little sketch of what they could look like. After some time, obviously, with some mature street trees. There is the pedestrian scale lighting to bring the scale of the space down to more pedestrian level, and some beautification with the planters. And this planter here is actually heavy enough so that it does form a good barrier between the pedestrians and the traffic to protect them. And these ones are the self-watering planters. As I know it's very dry and windy. So activation is intended to bring people downtown and create a destination. So a couple ways to create a destination during the first stage, which is the testing phase, is to, for example, create a stage like the venue in downtown High River. That area is used for arts and crafts, for plays, for festivals. I mean, you could have outdoor movies in the summer, or I guess not in the bright evening light, but it maybe in the spring and fall. Night markets, things like that. It creates spaces for community activities to happen. Maybe somebody wants to have like a fitness class go on there. And on the right is a parking spot pop-up area. This is really handy, or this is I guess intended to extend the patio of like a coffee shop or a restaurant onto into the outdoor space, into the public realm, when there isn't actually a lot of sidewalk there. So it's taking over a parking space and creating a patio that can be used not only perhaps by the cafe, but people who are walking by and just want to have a sit and chat. So the design guidelines that we've included in the Main Street Development Plan are intended to create an active and vibrant downtown that reflects Hannah's welcoming and unique character. So the first section is active frontages, and it's just to maintain the windows on the sidewalk, have people coming and going. So making sure any new buildings are built right against the sidewalk. No blank walls refers to that when a new building is built on Main Street, it shouldn't have just a blank facade. There is that building downtown with the mural on it. So even though it does have no windows and no activity going on, it is perceived that there's activity there because of the mural, and it's engaging. This can also be carried around the buildings to the alleys. So a continuation of the mural project. Materials refers to any new buildings or any renovations that go on Main Street should include sort of historic materials that fit in with the types of materials that are there now. Building massing section refers to respecting the scale of the downtown businesses and the context. So right now, a lot of the buildings are 1 story and they're a certain width. So just if you're having a larger building go in, you can break up the front so that it mimics the scale of the context that it's in, and continues the scale or the rhythm down the street, so it's not jarring. The signs refers to also just keeping the character of the downtown. Mixed use section refers to encouraging residential units being placed on second stories. And then those second stories again would reflect the building massing of the 2-story buildings downtown with the way the windows are placed. And then the transition zones, as I mentioned earlier, is to ensure that that area before you hit Main Street, when you're coming from Palliser or Pioneer Trail, is nice looking and attractive. It's got nice boulevards and curbs and has some street trees and some continuation with the Main Street site elements. So we did some costing estimates for the Main Street projects. These are broken out into the stages, as I mentioned. Now, I'm calling them stages because it's not necessarily a phase. If a large grant is secured, then maybe stage 1 and stage 2 are part of the same phase for that grant money, or stage 2 and stage 3 are part of the same phase. And site furniture refers to the benches, the tables, the planters, things like that. Infrastructure refers to the lighting and the sidewalk, the bump outs, the hardscape elements. Site elements are what gives the Main Street its character, including pedestrian scale streetlights, stage, street art, and the mid-block crosswalks are just to sort of add increased safety at the Legion, and then put a mid-block crosswalk by the post office. Because we had a place, or our storefront was right beside the post office, I saw a lot of people jaywalking, and I was thinking that perhaps a mid-block crosswalk could increase the safety of the people parking on the other side of the street and going to the post office. So I wanted to stop here and ask if there are any questions about the Main Street revitalization portion.
Just jump in.
Oh, I guess I had a question. I'm just wondering, with the size of the bump outs, we are leaving a lot of angle parking. Is there, like the one right at the intersection of the main building by the dental office, if it was reduced enough to add back in one stall on each side, would it make a difference in the appearance if that one was a little bit narrower than the ones on the outside where there's less maybe business activity and that sort of thing to be larger? Would that have it, would that change the appeal of the look? There tends to be, in my opinion, more business activity right at the center versus on either side, and maybe there is more value in having 4 more angle parking spots at that site versus the bump outs.
Yep.
That was my question.
And I think
Larger on both sides and narrower on the intersection.
mhm. I think that there'd be no drawback for testing that out during the first stage, in order to see if there is an aesthetic difference, or if people don't really need those parking spots, or if people definitely do need them and you make it narrow. No, I think that actually that's certainly something that needs to be sort of more site specifically evaluated during the testing phase. Yeah, that's a great idea.
These bump outs, how much of a pain in the backside are they for public works people?
I did reach out to the Public Works Department in Stettler to find out how they deal with it. You can see that the Stettler one, actually, this is quite handy here. We've got this pictured up. They've got this quite an angle here, whereas in the Fernie one, it's more of a less of an angle. So for Hannah, we've drawn them at this sort of more like this, so that the snowplows can come and just sort of move around like this. So Stettler,
No doubt it's harder. It's going to be more of a challenge. no doubt. And the other concern, you know, we have, and they're all concerns that can be dealt with, but where you have your bump outs, that's where the people remove their snow. So I think some of the businesses on the corners where there's a bump out, there'll probably be an expectation that the town's gonna clean those bump outs. And again, that snow will have to be dealt with because you just can't pile it on the, like normally a business will just shovel it out onto the street and then we'll clean it up. To do that at some of the spots, it might restrict traffic, you know, at where the bump outs are, so.
So who will be responsible for cleaning those bump outs then? You said
Well,
it's assumed that the town, but
I'm
will it be the
assuming that-
town or the business owners? If it's
Well-
the business owners, I don't think that's a good thing. We're incurring this on those corner businesses to care for something that the town has added.
Yeah, we haven't got into those details, but I'm assuming that where the bump outs are and you've got the additional concrete area to maintain, that those businesses are gonna expect or assume that the town is going to.
Well, I think they
manage
should
that,
be
so.
expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah, in my opinion, that it's in the street area, so that street is the responsibility of the town.
So,
In Stettler, it is Stettler who does the bump out. So everybody still maintains the sidewalk in front of their own business. And then the extra is by Stettler.
Sure, the staff will be impressed with that.
No, but it is what it is. It creates a different dynamic and you have to deal with it differently, so.
What's being done with the four-way stop signs?
They would be moved to the bump out like this one is here. Removed
So
from,
that would be a definite change to where we're at now, because we've got the wide streets now. The stop signs have been in the center. When you're at the intersections and you've reduced that, you can easily put the stop signs as you see in Stettler on the edges, and then the center pieces would be removed.
Jan, I'm also just wondering too, when I look at the stage 4 of the bump out being on all 4 corners in one intersection, if there would be consideration of reducing that and having 2 bump outs, you know, maybe in opposite corners in one intersection, and then on the further down intersection, you could maybe have 2 other bump outs. That would actually give you more traffic space and snow removal and lots of other things, rather than having a congested area of 4 bump outs on one corner.
yep.
Did you take into consideration the wind? Because to have that intersection that you described earlier, you know, we have category 2 hurricane level winds here. That, like, seriously, we've had it several times over 120 kilometers an hour. I lived in Winnipeg on Portage in Maine. You just don't stand there. And I can see the same potentially happening here. You've got this massive gathering area, which is beautiful, and everything is gone in 30 seconds because the wind just came in and sucked it all away. So I don't know if you considered the wind.
We did. In fact, during the engagement, people really liked the idea of movable furniture on the sidewalks, but that's certainly not an option because that would just blow away. And we have added wind screens to the west of the gathering areas in order to provide a little bit more protection. And that's something that can be tested out during the first stage.
I think that's a concern too for any of the, I know throughout there's, you know, flower pots on the light stands and everything. And, you know, as far as them surviving, I think they'd be whipped around continuously, especially on Palliser Trail. There was mention of which would be beautiful, but for the stretch of it, I don't think they would last very long at all.
Yeah.
We
Jen, has this thing been, like the infrastructure is gonna be the top priority ahead of these bump out things? We have to look at the sewer lines and water lines and everything. They have to be replaced before we go spending money on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's part of the plan.
Definitely.
Yeah, Camp Perky want to pay.
So the grant dollars, I'm confused then with the grant dollars. I thought it was not for hard infrastructure. So I thought it wasn't for underground and sewer lines and stuff like that. I thought it was.
There's a couple of
Virtually for
different,
aesthetics.
there's a couple of different grant options that we're investigating and pursuing. So
Okay.
one is definitely not for underground when one is. So
Okay,
there's two different grant streams that we would be moving towards.
and would the town of Hannah be liable for any contributions? Or is this gonna be fully initiated and constructed with grant dollars?
There is the expectation from the granting authorities that there will be a contribution from the town. It's probably gonna be in the neighborhood of 75-25, with us being 25.
In my opinion, if you're gonna, as Jen mentioned, putting a staging area, and you could take a place like the central garage there and build a staging thing in there and put a lot of your bump out stuff there. That make that your gathering thing, line up your intersections. I still see with it, if you take that intersection like they have in Stutter, that's still gonna be a challenge for trucks coming to the alleys. You know, with the big trucks that come around, they're gonna be infringing on them walkways. There's no two ways about it.
They may choose a different route after that gets in, but that was a question.
Yeah.
That I brought up as far about. turning.
Yeah, we do have semis that are
For sure
downtown,
we do.
whether they should be here or not, we do have semis that are downtown
Well, they have to be.
and that's a challenge. So whatever we do, we'll have to make sure that they are passable. And that might mean reducing the size of the bump outs too, so. Is there
I
any,
know if I was the guy downtown on the corner, I wouldn't want that bump out thing there if I'm gonna get stuck shoveling a whole bunch more snow and everything, because we have businesses downtown now that don't clean the sidewalks.
well, and that's
You know
what
what I mean?
we've talked about.
It's gonna be an issue.
The expectation, I'm sure, is going to be that the town will be maintaining that, so.
But I think, as far as the seating and that sort of thing, bringing people down and having them stay for a bit is good for business. They may, if there's a new market that's going to be put in downtown right at the corner, then that'd be ideal for them. But yeah, how much it is infringing in onto the roadway, which in my opinion, our downtown road is very narrow. Anybody that's got a dually or a extended cab or a 1-ton or whatever, they stick out a fair bit. And if they have a hitch, well, they stick out even more. And that is a bit of concern.
But that's
I have.
not changing those widths.
No, I know it isn't changing the
So-
widths, but it's still congesting the area for parking and stuff.
The other thing too, would we make consideration to where the bump outs would be based on the businesses already structured there? Because to me, a little bit of a gathering area sometimes might mean where there was a restaurant or a coffee shop or something like that, where you would want to, migrate and use that open space out there to sit. I mean, unless people are gonna go to somewhere and grab a coffee or a drink and then find the area, which I mean, we have lots of spots in town that are often vacant. People aren't finding those areas. So, yeah, just I think lots of.
Like I said,
things to consider.
this is not written in stone. So it's a concept, it's a plan, and there will need to be some tweaks as we move forward. There's no doubt about it. And again, we now have a new council and we've got some potentially different ideas and different ways of looking at it. So it's not written in stone. We're not walking away from here saying this is exactly how it's going to look. There is room for tweaks to the design, definitely.
I really would like to see comparisons that match our weather. High Level has Chinook's beautiful, way more, High River, sorry, than we do. We would almost be more comparable with something northern that's been improved upon as opposed to southern or Fernie. They have a fall, a spring. Sometimes we just have winter, 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 and 2 weeks of 40-degree summer. So making sure that this works all the time, as opposed to for 8 weeks of the year, we've got a beautiful, it's 8 weeks. We've got to make it
Stettler
Yeah.
has similar,
similar.
and so I've been down in Stettler during the winter.
Yeah,
Up to Stettler, whatever, and it appears, I guess maybe that's something we could do, is talk to Stettler and see how it is working for them, if there has been complaints about, the bump outs are too big and too small, or
did it
parking,
improve
or
the,
what they
yeah,
would do if they
yeah.
would do it over again or something.
Has there been any like monitoring or anything on any of these bump outs in any other town that, kind of signifies the usage of it? Like, how many people do you see on Main Street? Walk, that's the big thing, that go from store to store. People jump in their car and they drive. Parking facilities would be more of a concern than a sitting area. I mean, there's one restaurant on Main Street.
But the premise is to change, to change people's
We want to move
habits.
something forward.
It's not,
We
it's
don't
not
need clogging the
staying,
train tracks.
it's not staying in the same
Yeah.
area where we need to have parking for 100 vehicles
Right.
all the time. It's changing the attitude, changing the atmosphere, changing it so people will want to walk downtown and sit and have a coffee or sit and visit and do that. It's trying to bring them down
Reduce that
way.
traffic, reduce the traffic
Yeah.
downtown, have somewhere else for them to park. And it's been very successful. I mean, Stony Plain, as you know, I've
Yeah.
mentioned before, it's one of my
Yeah.
favorite towns. For the look of that downtown is spectacular. And it's just beautiful. And that's that would be more comparable weather-wise to Hannah, would be Stony Plain.
Well, and I think after, we do have the library parking area, and I think it's underutilized because people just didn't want to
Park
park
right in front.
downtown because
Yeah.
it's easier, and I'm one of them.
Hmm.
But, retire to Hannah, we have to still consider the seniors, that a lot of them have mobility issues, and they can only get downtown with driving. And being able to park closer to a building, they don't need to be right on at the front door or anything, but, that's an issue for them. If we're also promoting retiring to this area, we have to still maintain a parking area and maybe relocate those that are able, and maybe they're marked, clearly marked with upright signage saying these are for seniors only. And
Or mobility issues or whatever, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good idea.
and get people to utilize the area parking. I mean, that was one suggestion with the vacant lot that's now north of the York, is if it doesn't sell, maybe the town can be utilizing it as an extra parking spot or extra parking area to get people to walk. It's encouraging the activity and getting the unnecessary vehicles off Main Street.
Well, I think there's a million things we can get granular about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little.
One of the biggest challenges we got in this whole thing is through the Chamber of Commerce is trying to get these businesses open 6 days a week. This 5-day-a-week thing is what's killed by downtown. That's what's done it. I know when I was a kid to grow up in this town, Saturday night, she was bumper to bumper with vehicles cruising the main street, the farmers dropped the kids off, the kids met with the animals. There was people moving up and down the sidewalk steady. You don't see that now.
That is
You
true.
drive down our street Saturday night, there ain't a damn vehicle parked on it. It's like Saturday afternoon. You're lucky if there's 4 or 5 vehicles in that whole 3 blocks. There's nothing there.
The trouble
is trying to get the businesses open.
But it's a chicken and the egg thing,
Yeah.
right, too?
Well-
So if you're a business owner and you open on Saturday and
One customer.
spend your dollars to keep open and be open and nobody comes, or you get one or two people, you're losing money.
It doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make
Yes,
sense as
I
a
know.
business owner, so.
But, and also, you gotta look at this downtown. You've got a lot of insurances, you got banks, you got people like that that are 5-day-a-week
That's right.
businesses. I mean, that's what the majority of our downtown is now. We
Well,
don't
that's-
have two shoe stores and two ladies clothing stores and, you
Yeah,
know, and this night, I mean, sure, you got your share of barber shops, hair salons in the downtown core, but again, they're 5 days a week.
But
The
I think
majority of them.
that's what this is all about, is to get people downtown. And maybe we'll get more businesses setting up down there as well.
yeah, no, it's
Don't know,
a change of,
combination
it's a change of,
Well, I was gonna say, the structure of the downtown in general has changed.
Yeah.
You know, for the restaurants, the type of businesses in our downtown have changed. Well, I've been here for 22 years and it's changed in 22 years. So if you want to go back 40 years, I'm sure it's significantly changed.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
And as people of Hannah, we travel. So, I mean, and having the FedEx Purelator DHL depot, what I receive, it's undeliverable freight is 40 to 50 packages, be it Amazon, Lulu, Mark's Work Warehouse, shoes and boots are kind of the common thing. So, I mean, I get probably, I would say 20% of the parcels that they deliver in town. For example, Purelator will have 240 packages on, I might get 20.
Yeah.
And the rest are delivered. So, I mean, I realize revitalizing the downtown is important, but we need to make it somehow available. The shoe stores, I've talked to the people that have had the shoe stores in town, the challenges are having enough inventory and having what people want. I mean, it's easy to say we need to do this, this, and this, but the actual reality of it is you can't afford to.
Well, and the other thing I think we should be concentrating on is getting some doctoring and the hospital thing more active. Everybody goes to the city to do their doctoring. While you're there, you must be buying groceries and shoes and clothing or whatever else you need. That's the biggest downfall.
It is.
We've got no
Yeah.
doctoring, we've got no
What's the
education.
answer to it though, Fred?
Huh?
What's the answer to it? You know,
Well, AHS tells you where
Health service.
a lot of stuff to do.
But we've done some things ourselves as a town. For example, when the hockey group was trying to get it rolling in the fall, they go on rent ice. This year it was in Brooks, years past it's John Mallard. So you're chasing, 100 kids and let's say hypothetically 60 parents to Drumheller or Brooks to go shopping. To go to hockey. Guess what they're doing while the kids? are
no,
on the
no
ice?
doubt.
Yeah, and that, the reason for that is for the rodeo. So the rodeo brought people in. So, you kick one out, so you bring another in, like, the rodeo is a huge annual event. In order to be able to bring it in, you had to sacrifice the use of the arena.
So, Mr. Mayor, I think we should move on.
Yeah.
So Jen, you were gonna then talk a little bit about the streetscape, community streetscape and seniors amenity zone and so signage. So I'll turn it back to you, Jen.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, thanks. So the second plan is the community development plan. And we'll start with this is all this refers to the residential areas of the community. So we did a site analysis and looked at the sidewalks and the streetscapes within the community. There are some really lovely boulevards that have grass and trees on them and really create a really nice pedestrian walking experience. The sidewalks themselves didn't seem to have a standard width. Some of them were quite narrow and there was some unevenness and some of the quality was not the same across the community. And unevenness, especially in a community where you have a lot of seniors, who may have balance issues, or you have a lot of wheeled mobility vehicles or even strollers. It makes it hard for them to get out and use the sidewalks. They're not as attractive for use. And then street trees are also really positive for pedestrians. They really create a really nice, comfortable walking area. Hannah has a great street tree planting program in place, which definitely needs to continue and perhaps be expanded. What we heard during the engagement was that the character of the community is great. It's really enjoyed. Some of the streets could use a little bit of lighting because they would get rather dark at nighttime. So on the left here are the images that were shown during the engagement, and then they correspond to this chart on the right. So people also liked the idea of raised crosswalks to increase safety at intersections. So then we built the community development plan based on what we heard and the site analysis. So it has 3 components. The first is the community streetscapes, so in the residential areas, and that deals with safety of intersections, the pedestrian experience walking on the sidewalks, and then gathering areas. Then the seniors amenity areas is broken into seniors amenity zones, which are areas close to the seniors lodges. And then routes, which are the pedestrian linkages between the lodges and desired points of interest. And then we've also suggested a walking loop for the Hannah Lodge. So this is the overall community development plan map. As you can see, the purple circles are the seniors amenity zones around the lodge and Parkview Manor. And those include beautification within 250 meter radius in order to promote activity. The red circles are community intersections, which could be priority areas for intersection improvements. And then we are suggesting a painted scooter lane as a test between the lodge, and then Parkview Manor could be included in that, and the downtown, which is probably the preferred destination. And it passes by some of the seniors gathering areas. So in terms of community intersections, the goal was to increase safety. As mentioned, raised crosswalks were identified during engagement as something that would be preferred. That's where the crosswalk is raised slightly from the road elevation so that it forms a speed hump for traffic and pedestrians can walk straight across it. This one does show a little bit of a curb cut down, but raised crosswalks sometimes come up to the edge of the sidewalks. There's no ramp down. It's just a smooth surface between the sidewalks across the street. Hannah does a really good job actually right now with the curb cuts. This is just a reminder that curb cuts should be in the direction of travel, and you should avoid having them right on the corner where people in wheelchairs are just shot out into the middle of the intersection. We did explore tactile indicators with the engagement, and they seem to be an option that people liked. It just gives an indication of where the edge of the sidewalk is. And then what's recommended for Hannah is increased striping of crosswalks, just to increase the safety of children and seniors crossing. So the stop line is pushed back from the intersection so that the driver has good views to all 4 corners. The white stripes are just the painted stripes between the crosswalks, or between, sorry, the the sidewalks, and then the yellow indicates that this is a raised crosswalk. So you can have a mix and match on intersections. If you have the striping, you would need a curb cut at each edge of the sidewalk, whereas a raised crosswalk doesn't necessarily need that curb cut. So the streetscapes is to benefit, or improvements are recommended to benefit the pedestrian experience. A lot of people really like the rolled curbs that seem to be pretty standard in Hannah. However, when the developer or whoever is putting in the sidewalk, if a rolled curb is used, the sidewalk panels themselves need to be wider because you lose another 6 inches because the rolled curb goes down and you can't walk on it like you can walk on a standard curb. So that's made some of the sidewalks feel quite narrow. So that's just an upgrade to the sidewalk standards. We're proposing community gathering spots as little areas within the community that can be used as a little community building area. You can have them at the corner of an intersection of the corner of the block, sort of like the bump outs in that are recommended for Main Street, or just in the middle of the block if somebody would like to turn their boulevard into a community gathering spot. And it's just a really nice way of creating a community meeting spot. Treed boulevards, just to continue the implementation of those throughout the residential areas. And then, as I mentioned, street lights, people were mentioning that some of the streets can be very dark at night. So implementing pedestrian scale street lights in the residential areas. This is an example of a community gathering spot that I just happened on in Edmonton. This one even has some bike racks. I would recommend having 2 benches facing one another to increase the social areas and increase having conversations there. It's got a garbage here, and it's just a nice little area to happen upon when you're walking through a residential space. The seniors amenity zone, as I mentioned, it's the 250 meter radius from the 2 seniors residences. It's intended to promote physical activity by providing places to walk that have benches every so often so that people can take a rest. There's beautification in terms of the planting. It promotes walking in the community and increases the opportunity for social interactions because you can meet people outside and have a visit. And then the seniors amenity route. This little map shows that it's between this one in particular between Hannah Lodge and then across and can link to Hector King Hunter Pioneer Park, as well as the senior circle, and then maybe go on to downtown. The routes would have some intersection upgrades, seating areas so that people can rest as they're walking. And then this is a really good chance to test out the scooter lanes. We had some.
You mentioned, I think, I didn't notice it prior to us, but the senior lodge that you've got marked there is actually the community center. So the senior lodge is further south of Hector King Hunter.
The senior circle is actually the community center. Senior circle is down to the
It's
bottom
further
of the
south.
screen about another block.
Oh, okay. So someone gave me some bad intel there. I won't mention any names. Yeah, but it's just to link. So again, this is a sort of a more of a master plan level, and when things get built, they would be get down to the finer grain detail. the scooter lanes, we did have somebody come into the storefront during the engagement on a scooter to prove that she really needs to have ways to get around that are safe. She doesn't feel safe scootering on the main street, although some people do. And so she was hoping that scooter lanes could be tested so that they could become permanent in the future. And then the Hannah Lodge walking loop would be for the residents and anybody who comes to visit them, to give them a loop, because people really prefer walking in a loop rather than in a single line. So this gives them a loop to walk around. There'd be resting spots along. You could sit and watch the sunset. It would be lit in the morning and the evening, and promote activity and socialization for the people who are living there. So then we also have some recommended community design guidelines. The first is sidewalks, and that section deals, as I mentioned, increased standards for sidewalk design so that they're wider and more comfortable for wheeled vehicles. The second is parking, to establish an accessible parking zone program so that people can get little signs in front of their houses so that they can park there if they have a need for accessible parking. Street lights, to make the residential areas have pedestrian scale street lights and lights to make walking at night more comfortable. As I mentioned, the Streetscape program is quite excellent in Hannah, so to continue with this, and maybe ensure that only pruning of publicly owned trees is done by the town and not residents who might not know what they're doing. So the sections on the seniors amenity areas would be to establish the seniors amenity zone and the seniors amenity routes so that they can be prioritized. Testing out the scooter lanes and permitting the mobility scooters to be operated on certain roadways within those scooter lanes. The community gathering spot section talks about the potential to put these within the residential areas, on boulevards or at intersections. Maintaining of the boulevards is recommended, and in identifying what is acceptable for boulevards. So for example, to have grass, to have a well-maintained, no gravel in the boulevards, things like that. And then we're also recommending additional support to the Communities in Bloom program, since it does have a really good promotion of civic pride. It beautifies the community, and it is led by residents at a grassroots level, which is which promotes volunteerism and all the good things that people would like to have in their community. Because the community development plan includes projects that are project-based, there is no summary or staging of this. It would be as funding becomes available for infrastructure repair, such as sidewalks or streetlights, then these projects can be implemented. If somebody comes and says, you know, I'd like to put a community gathering spot in my community, and I'm willing to go and apply for funding from a bunch of different organizations, then this can be, that a project can be implemented at that point. And then if the Hannah Lodge wants to implement the walking loop, then this provides a framework for that as well.
I had another question. On number 7, as far as the value, the 48,000, if you go to the individual where it indicates that the actual details for that section, I think $125,000 was not included in that accounted for the electrical upgrades. And would be more like 181,000 with the addition changes in the 10% contingency as well. So if you could check that out, that would be greatly appreciated as well.
Yes, I'm sorry, I do see that the spreadsheet was missing some cells in its accounting. Yeah, that would be a little bit higher. Specifically about 260,000, including all the electrical for the bollard lighting. Thanks for that.
Yeah, just to check that mine is a little bit different, but I could be wrong.
Okay. And so are there any questions about the community development plan?
That's I was just told this morning, the gas bill was $510. That house right there.
Really, Dave?
Uh,
double.
I don't think there's much for questions on this one.
That was the gas bill.
We need to kind of move on.
Okay, as Kim had mentioned earlier, the previous council had looked at the Main Street revitalization as the priority, and the community development plan as something that could be implemented on a project by project basis as funding became available for those specific projects. So the third plan is the signage and wayfinding development plan. So we started by doing a site analysis, and that included looking at the gateways into Hannah. So here are the two experiences along Highway 9. As you can see, most signs are the generic highway signs. The monument signs aren't really large and flashy and don't really catch your eye. This one does have some vegetation around it, which the verticality helps to draw the eye, but there should be some more. The electronic sign could be more eye-catching, and there should be some cohesiveness, some sort of commonality between the look of this and the look of the monument signs in terms of like the logo. So a consistent brand or look and feel was noticed as being needed. And then in terms of the signage and wayfinding, directional wayfinding within the community, again, there was no cohesive strategy. There are all sorts of different signs, different looks, different sizes, different naming of, or inconsistent naming of destinations, and a lot of clutter. So some branding was identified as needed for this, and a removal of the competing signs. During the engagement, we looked at where people thought Hannah's gateway is in order to be able to maximize any funding, get the biggest bang for your buck, I guess. So most people thought that the gateway is at the intersection of Highway 9 and Palliser Trail, and then also perhaps a little bit at Main Street or 2nd and Palliser Trail. So taking all that, we created a design approach. So the signage hierarchy works together to create the plan. So the hierarchy is the entrance is important. Then we also have town-owned points of interest, which need a consistent look and feel to the entrance, as well as to the directional wayfinding. So together they work to create a way to get through the town that's easy and straightforward. And the objectives were to celebrate the main entrance and to curate a visitor's journey through the community and convey Hannah's sense of place or sense of community through a cohesive look and feel. So the first section is looking at the town entrance. So all of these are the highway signs from either direction, and the green are the monument signs. So those would be a replacement. And then an addition of a gateway sign at the railway tracks that frames the entrance to Hannah, because really until you get to the railway, it's sort of more industrial and commercial and not as community oriented. And then there'd be an enhanced boulevard landscape zone in this area to really make the gateway look really attractive to visitors. So the town entrance celebration would be characterized by a cohesive look and feel. Since this is a master plan, these are not like final designs for any signs, but they're an indication in order to get costing and to show that there is going to be a cohesive look. Any further work on this would include a graphic designer as part of the consultant team. They're intended to lead one into the community. So the highway monument sign is larger and bolder and sticks out of the prairies so that it's noticeable as you're driving through. Minor upgrades to the existing electronic sign would bring it into the cohesive look and feel. And then at the railway, at the old railway tracks, there'd be a sign that's smaller, but still looks very similar to the other ones to show that you're actually getting into the community. So directional wayfinding refers to the signs that tell you where to go within the community. You could have flowers or banners on the side. They're on their own look of post, so they're distinctive. You can recognize them when you see them down the street. And the priority was to point to destinations that people would want to go to in the downtown area, as well as recreational facilities. These little red circles show where directional wayfinding signage could go. And the number is whether you're coming in from the main entrance from Highway 9 and Palliser Trail. Those are the number ones. So you'd come up here, you would see, oh, I can go downtown. So you'd come downtown and you say, okay, I can turn right here to go to the arena or go straight. And then it would lead you to the parking area or over to the Heritage Village. And then the number twos are if you're entering the town from a different direction, then those are the signs that would direct you how to get to downtown or to any of the other points of interest. Pioneer Village, I guess, not Heritage Village. And then we are suggesting as well a downtown entrance between the Main Street area and the transition zones so that you can see where the downtown is as you're approaching it down Second, just to make it a little bit of a distinct district. It does have a similarity and feel to the directional wayfinding signs, but it's a little different to show that, hey, you know, you're arriving at someplace really special. This is our downtown and we're really proud of this. Oops. And then replacement of the town-owned points of interest sign. signs to include the new Hannah brand that was developed a couple years ago. Now, how this would be done would be dependent on what existing signs are there right now. So for example, if there's a wall mounted sign, it's an easy enough thing just to create a new panel and put it on. For some, where like a park typically has this wood post and metal sign. But again, it would just be dependent on what's already there. And they visually convey ownership and location and really clue in visitors to, yeah, this is the destination where I want to go. So we have signage design guidelines as well. The first has to do with location. So the decluttering, ensure that there's visibility for these signs for a certain distance ahead that's not constrained. Have a no advertising zone around, for example, the monument signs, so that they do stand out and they're not lost in lots of other signs. They stand out, and things about don't pile snow next to your signs, because that sort of takes it away from their effectiveness. The second section, the highway commercial land use, is to really address Palliser Trail and the attractiveness of the stretch between the highway and the, I guess, pretty much the downtown. Section mentions things about like have established boulevards that contain grass, pave the driveway aprons so that it's just not a big gravel mess, and that you can really mark the entrances to these commercial lands, maintain the boulevards, maybe put heavy planters on to mark the driveway edges, and then revitalizing the town-owned lands adjacent to Highway 9. This can be done in a number of ways. We're recommending maybe have a picnic area close to the visitor center, or maybe plant a tree nursery to just make it a little more attractive and to show people when they're driving by that there actually is something there, and Hannah isn't just, you know, a road off to, you know, who knows what. So because the signage and wayfinding plan is more of a comprehensive thing, all the parts work together. There is a total for this, and it is intended to be implemented, you know, as one phase, which could be stretched out over, I guess, a longer period of time, but certainly to get things done as part of one phase. And are there any questions about the signage and wayfinding plan?
The only part I'm concerned about is your emphasis on grass. This is a desert area. We should almost be encouraging not using grass. So you talk a lot about planting in grass in an area where a lot of things don't grow. So I don't know if you have any suggestions on the type of foliage that can actually be used here that's not a water hog.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question, because you're also looking at, you know, close to roads, it needs to be salt tolerant as well. Essentially, like grass was mentioned just because gravel doesn't look very attractive in, I guess, its current form. Although I did have so some other ground cover native grasses, prairie grasses, doesn't necessarily need to be Kentucky mowgrass or Kentucky grass, bluegrass that needs to be mowed or watered, you know, something a little bit more drought tolerant. Maybe that's even a little bit longer, you know, just to create something nice to look at. Yesterday, I did attend like a lunch and learn presentation, and there's a product that it's like a tackifier, sort of some sort of polymer that you can actually spray on gravel that allows water to percolate through, but keeps the gravel in place. So an option to grass would be to have more of a decorative gravel, not just what you would normally find in a pit run. Get something really nice, and then you use this product on it, and then it keeps it in place. It doesn't get spread around, and actually you can have really heavy vehicles driving over it as well. So if accidentally a tractor trailer drove over it, it wouldn't wreck it. So that's something we can certainly be looked at.
Any other questions, comments?
Well, comment more, the more money that we're spending on creating a place like that, it's costing us more money down the road for maintenance on it. It's like if you're gonna put a park thing, a rest area, say on the north, on the corner, like they showed one on the corner of where I live. I mean, you're gonna put it there, you're gonna put benches and everything, garbages, everything, that's gonna cost more money for public service to maintain that. So
So
that's the building.
yeah, the trade-off is creating a place that hopefully attracts residents to use it, as well as attracts visitors and perhaps new residents to the town. And those are really hard to quantify in terms of a cost-benefit analysis. But I do encourage you to think about, the social opportunities that are created by these projects and investments, that might not necessarily have a return on investment that could be monetized, but in terms of social capital is quite significant.
I think, I'll just make a comment that I know when the wind is blowing really bad down Palliser Trail, is it the fuel station that's across from the that's along there, yeah. That area, when people are driving through it, the dust and everything is blowing around, and visibility is an issue, as well as, it's not very pleasant to drive into. I think UFA's gas station is a little better with the rock along the side. It's a lot heavier, but anything that is anytime the wind blows, and it blows quite a bit more often, it does tend to create a bit of a windstorm and a dust storm all around that area as people are approaching. So, having an area designated and somehow being able to secure or dirt or whatever to keep it from blowing around, I think would be a huge asset, in my opinion, but that's. And yeah, everything does cost money, and that is the trade-off. So it is prioritizing.
So, Mr. Mayor, any further questions from anybody? Okay, as some of this information is fairly recent, fairly new to some of our counselors, so I do appreciate Jen, Paul being here. I know you've presented this probably in various forms, probably four or five times you've been before us. I appreciate your time. So I think with that, without any other questions, we'll certainly let you guys go, and I can be in touch as we move forward with our next steps and our plan, I guess, moving forward. So
Okay, great.
well, thank you for your time.
Thank
you.
you.
It's been great
Very much.
Thank you.
Good day.
working with the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, there is a resolution there, a recommendation there to basically thank them.
The council recommendation, the council thanks representatives from 818 Studio LTD for their update on the Hannah Community Development Project. Motion by Councilor Wooden, second, or all in favor? Carried.
So, Mr. Mayor, I did indicate before we started that I would do a bit of where are we at now, but I think we've got our next group here. So I think I can deal with that later in my report if we have some time. So I'd like to, we have, for those of you on council, we have Devin Diano here and Cody McNair here. So they want to provide council with an update on Palliser Regional Municipal Services, what they provide to their members, what services they can provide. So I'll have you guys step up, Devin. I'm not sure technical wise, you and Lori will have to figure out how we want to. Okay. So does anybody need a quick break?
I can plug my laptop into it.
Yes, please. Can we
Okay.
have a quick break?
Okay,
Is that
yeah,
okay, or should we wait?
Yeah, no, I think we, if you need a quick break.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. No, no problem. So I don't know, Devin, our room's not set up ideal for presentations, so I'm not sure. We could
Can
maybe
we move
slide
that
this
over?
to the corner here.
Yeah, that works.
And if Lori's gonna be moving the slides, then that's, or if the clicker works from there, great.
You guys need water?
Okay. Yeah, that's probably good. I can.
And you're still.
You need to be able to see.
Still 6 feet away from me.
Yeah, that's good. Do you guys want us to wear masks?
No.
No.
Only if you feel like you want to.
If you
Devin.
put one on, that means I have to put mine on. So.
Sounds good. I never know these days.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we just have a few minutes here. I guess if nobody else needs a break, when Councilor Warwick gets back in, we can move forward.
Are we still on?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad we were here for that presentation because I was there, had some good conversations with Jen. And it was fun to be on the other side of things, just as a citizen, and giving her feedback rather than being involved in making the plan. And she did a really good job with public engagement and talking to
Yeah.
people.
It was amazing. Like, I was there at the farmer's market a few times and yeah,
Yeah, she's very good one-on-one talking to people and talking through the ideas and whatnot, so. Yeah, there's some good ideas in that plan for sure.
yeah, it'd be nice to get the infrastructure done right away. That was, I think, identified as a priority as far as the water.
Is that's the idea with this plan, is like when you're doing underground infrastructure, to also do above ground, kind of change the streetscape?
In the stages.
We start with $2 million or something before we get into it.
Yeah, the first step is finding the money.
Yeah.
Well,
I was gonna ask, is there, like, you guys don't currently have grant funding?
Not to deal with, like, you're looking, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but you're probably looking to do the downtown core, to do it, replace all the infrastructure, replace all the above ground stuff to their plan. You're probably looking at $5 to $6 million. So
And what for strictly the water sewer?
water sewer is probably, I think it's about 2.8.
Say $1 million a block.
So
And then we would build on top of something
Yeah.
good, right?
Yeah.
Then we put the perfume on.
Okay, Devin, I'll turn it over to you.
Let's go.
The floor is yours. Yeah.
Sure, sounds good. Yeah, so for those who don't know me, my name is Devin. I'm the director of Palliser Regional Municipal Services.
With this being an election year, we're trying to make it out to all of our municipal councils and provide a presentation, just talk a little bit about Palliser, the services we provide to the town. Once you're familiar. And then I also kind of worked in what I'm calling a bit of a planning 101. So for those who planning documents will be a bit more new to you. Not going to go like super in depth, or else you guys will all probably fall asleep and we'd be here all day. But I'll scrape the surface, and then if anyone has questions or you want to reach out to me after and learn more, I'm happy to answer those or even come back. Yeah, so I'll go through just a little bit of background about Palliser. Start with talking about our planning services specifically. Then that'll lead into the planning system in Alberta and planning implementation examples. Then we'll talk a bit about subdivision safety code services, and then I'll pass it to Cody to talk. Sorry, I should introduce Cody as well. Cody, he's our GIS coordinator.
Work one style, there you go.
So to start, Palliser was formed in 1995 when the province disbanded regional planning commissions. Palliser was actually, we were talking about this morning, was existed as a regional planning commission dating back to the early 1980s. I don't know if it was the late 1970s. I don't know if anyone here. Essentially what occurred was in 1995, the province passed the new Municipal Government Act, which replaced the Planning Act.
The year spread?
50 bucks.
It's a great sound.
The trains are coming.
That's Hannah. I thought it was you, Brad.
I shut mine off.
This time.
Yeah, so in 1995, the Planning Act was replaced with the Municipal Government Act, and at that time, the province disbanded regional planning commissions. And then in 2007, Palliser was officially incorporated as a non-for-profit corporation. So today we provide regional planning, GIS, and safety code services to 24 member municipalities across South-Central Alberta. I did a count on the acres or hectares one day, and I think it's about the size of Norway. I believe it's Norway.
Oh.
So quite a large area. Today PRMS operates under user pay principles, so our sources of shareholder requisitions, administration of safety codes, planning and subdivision applications, general consulting fees for special projects, and we provide pretty heavily like grant funding. And then our existing staff, myself, CEO, we have Carrie Bog, who's our executive assistant, Shahir is our current planner. We have Gary Wilson, subdivision planning, has been with Palliser since the early 90s, quite a while. Cody's our GIS coordinator, and then we have safety codes contract personnel, so that's Linda Taylor. She's the safety codes clerk who operates at the town of Drummond office. So one project I wanted to talk about is our Palliser Regional Service Enhancement Project. It's a pretty big undertaking that we're currently looking at. It's a project that's been talked about for quite a few years, so I'm happy we're actually able to start getting some work done on it. But essentially what it's looking at is a complete new strategic plan and review of their cost sharing model. So we're essentially reviewing all the services that Palliser provides, reaching back out to our municipalities, going to make sure that those services are aligning with your priorities. And so what is it that you guys truly need from Palliser? We're reviewing organizational structure and resources, so making sure the organization is functioning effectively, looking at staffing, process, and oversights, and then also looking at, again, funding. So reviewing the cost sharing model to ensure equitable requisitions for all shareholders and organization sustainability.
So just there, Cody or Devin, so the province has a grant program called the Alberta Partnership.
Yeah,
Alberta Partnership. So Alberta Community Partnership, so I think was it Town of Troche was the lead?
Village of Acme.
Village of Acme was the lead on this, and so they are able to get the funds to provide the funding to do this project. So this isn't coming out of Palliser's dollars or their member contributions. This is a grant that was provided by the province to undertake this this study that Devin's talking about.
That's right. Yeah, and I kind of look at it almost as like a rebuild of Palliser. I mean, since Palliser has existed, just the trends have changed so much in what municipalities require, affordability and resources that you have. So we want to relook at Palliser and make sure that what we're providing is what you guys need. If there's additional things that we can provide, is there things we're currently doing that we shouldn't? So yeah, it's an important project.
So is it 100% coverage or 75-25?
100%.
Ooh, that's
So
awesome.
we were able to get 160,000. Yeah, we can thank Cody actually. Keep that up there.
Thank you.
Sorry, Cody, did you?
Well, I was gonna say, and staff time is covered off on that.
Yeah. A little bit. So services provided, one of our major services we provide is creation of statutory plans and land use bylaws. I'm gonna get into a little bit about what each of those are, but first is we do preparation and full documents, so that includes municipal development plans, municipal development plans, area structure plans, area development plans, preparation and full scale land use bylaws, statutory plan amendments, land use bylaw amendments, rezoning applications as required, and then attendance reports and recommendations at public hearings for proposed amendments and plan documents. So I think the most recent rezoning would have been the fertilizer.
Yes. Last summer.
So when Palliser originally, sorry, I'm trying to think of this, but we were operating under a 5-year cycle for plan documents until about 2017, when the province changed the MGA and made requirements for IDPs, as well as making MDPs mandatory for all of our communities. So that took our workload from doing mostly just land use bylaws and a few MDPs for the larger municipalities, and it added 40, 50, 60 plus documents that we had to complete within a 2 to 3 year time frame. So that kind of put Palliser in a bit of a tailspin, I would say. Set us back on our review cycle with land use bylaws and MDPs. And we were working on IDPs, which was very time consuming. I think IDPs alone were 30 plus, because some of our rurals have multiple municipalities within, so they have to have an IDP in each of those municipalities, as well as all their shared borders around. So Drumheller, for example, had 5 IDPs alone. So it was a lot.
And so that's completed now, like all of those.
Yes, and so that was interesting too, because after the 2 to 3 years, right when we were getting to the end of the project timelines, that was when the UCP government came back in, and they made the change that IDPs were no longer required. So all the projects that were about to be adopted and passed by council, I would say 50 to 60% got dropped after all the work we did.
What killed them? They may come back soon.
Yeah, so I have a big box of IDPs in my office that are just,
Not destroyed.
yeah, so that was interesting for sure. So the way the planning system functions in Alberta is based on a planning hierarchy, is how I refer to it at least. So At the top, you have your provincial legislation, so this would be stuff like the Water Act, Alberta Land Stewardship Act, AOPA Agricultural Operations Act. And then the big one is the Municipal Government Act, which you guys are probably familiar with. So Municipal Government Act is what gives legislative authorities to all planning documents below. So first we have what we call our statutory planning documents. So that includes regional plans, which there isn't one in place for the region, the Red Deer watershed region right now. So that's, we won't go into detail on that. Then we have IDPs, they're the highest on the hierarchy. Then we'd have your municipal development plan. Then from there you would feed into area structure plans. I'll show a little bit more about how that works. So, from there, you have your land use bylaw, which gets into more specific detail. It's not considered a statutory planning document. And then from there, that filters all those documents above, filter into your decision making for land use redesignations and rezonings, reviewing subdivision applications, as well as development permit applications. Does anyone have questions on that? Feel free to jump in. So your statutory plans. Statutory plans are legally binding documents or laws within municipalities. So they're adopted by municipal law. All statutory plans adopted by a municipality must be consistent with each other and with provincial legislation. And for example, if you had, say, a conflicting policy in an area structure plan versus your MDP is higher up on that hierarchy, so the MDP would prevail. If that makes sense. Council cannot vary a statutory plan, and adopting a statutory plan does not require the municipality to undertake projects referred to in it. But council administrative decisions must be consistent with the requirements of these documents. So the main statutory plans that the town of Hannah has, of course, your municipal development plan. It's broken into two parts. Volume 1 is kind of context and background, and then volume 2 is actually the policies themselves. Then there's quite a few area structure plans actually in the town of Hannah. Canada Green Landing Area Structure Plan is one that I'll show some examples of, and then also I did find an old area redevelopment plan for the downtown from the 1980s.
So Devin, that was going to be my question, is how often are these reviewed and revised? And like, how often are they presented that even the municipalities are reviewing them and contributing to some change to them?
So our goal is to have these on a 5-year review cycle. And in 2017, that's when we kind of got thrown in that tailspin, but we're getting back on track with that.
I think you've got some examples of dates further on here. So.
Yeah, and actually, I'll talk about it, but land use bylaws being reviewed this year and your MDP is reviewed next year.
So that would that mean at that point in time that we're all caught up on all those bylaws?
Yeah, for sure. And you guys are still, like, we always make sure that everyone's in compliance with any provincial legislation, like following the Municipal Government Act are all up to do with that. That's our main priority. And then now it's like looking back at some of these old documents and saying, how can we make them better? Do they still represent them?
So when we talk about the 5-year goal, so the town of Hannah's current land use bylaw was developed and approved in 2012. So doing it in 22, so the 5 years is now 10 years. There has been some amendments to the land use bylaw that councils have undertaken over those 10-year periods, but 22 will be a full review of our land use bylaw. And it's needed, no doubt about it. And I think Devin indicates later on that MDP was done and approved in 2013. So again, perfect world, it would have been reviewed in 2018. It's now scheduled for 2023. So our 5 has gone to 10. Whether we can do 5 is always a question of resources and dollars, so.
For sure. And that's something we're exploring with the project as well. Is this 5-year cycle realistic for 24 municipalities? And if it is, like, what are the resources we need to make sure we're actually
Yeah.
achieving that?
And then they'll come back to their members and say, if you want a 5-year review plan, this is what it's going to cost. And that's where the rubber will hit the road. And municipalities will then say, oh, we'd like that, but it's too rich for our blood. We'll have to go on the 10-year plan because that's where our resources allow us to move forward. So,
Or like, and is that'll be different for every community, right? So if Youngstown, for example, that hasn't maybe had a whole lot of activity.
I don't know if it would change much, Devin, correct me if I'm wrong, because you don't want to, there's a standard in play and there's a cost formula in play. I guess the only reason I would think it would move forward faster would be if our council said, we're not happy with 10 years, we want 5 years. Devin comes back to us and says, okay, if you want 5 years, your requisition already is this. And if you want 5 years, you have to pay a special requisition, to get this, because you can't treat municipalities different because we're all based on funding, so.
And I do try to, I also try to prioritize it in a way from where municipalities really need the help. So for example, the town of Trochu, their documents are older than your guys's, but they were more than happy with where they currently are. So we had them scheduled 2 years ago and they were okay with us pushing it a few years and we were able to get some of the higher priority.
So if we see activity coming up, then we would be more inclined to want to have a review of our current bylaws to see if
Yeah,
things need to be changed in order to accommodate
that's
new activity.
So just a heads up too for council. So as we move forward in 2022 and the town of Hannah's land use bylaw review, that will add significant workload here to staff, and it will add significant workload to council because you will be expected to provide your input on the land use bylaws, review it. So there will be a public consultation component. There'll be a fair bit. It's not a simple review. There's a lot of work involved in that. So
yeah, and we like to have a few workshops with council as well.
yeah.
So the other way we've been looking at it too is we're trying to structure it so like the lifespan of these documents, it's not to say that every 5 years you throw it out and start rewriting the book. So what we're trying to do is essentially say every 10 years, we're planned for a full throw of the book, but every 5 years, it's maybe just a review. That's gonna kind of ebb and flow, like some municipalities might be happy with their documents and they're happy with it for 15 years. Others after 2 or 3 years will be like, oh, this is not working for us, we need to restart. So it's kind of hard to plan it all out, but we do the best to stick to the schedule as close as we can. So there's at least a bit of structure.
And there has been instances where you're in between the middle of a review cycle and something's not working for an MVP or an LUB, and we make an amendment to it. It's more work for also, but if something's not working, you have that ability to change it. If your review cycle's not coming up for a while.
And I think, Devin, I know you've got it in your slides.
Yeah, I
How
think we
many
did 6
how many amendments have occurred since the 2012 adoption?
That's it. So yeah, like land use bylaws, there's always little things that occur or developments. You're talking with the developer to adjust something slightly to help out a project, and we can make those changes. So an example, I want to show an example of the implementation of how these documents work together. So starting with your MDP, your MDP is your high level policy. So it's not going to be really area specific, more from a bird's eye view. So for example, one of the policies or a few policies within 3.1 talks about future residential growth shall be considered as shown in figure 1 as a logical extension of recently developed. So figure 1 is your future land use map on the right-hand side, and essentially it just shows what certain areas should develop as logical extensions of pre-developed areas. So the area I have circled in red is actually, there's an area structure plan in place for that area. That's the Canada Wayfinding. And then DP shows that area as slated for estate residential and acreage type development. So we'll get.
That's behind Hannah Building Supply?
Yes.
Okay,
That's it.
thank you.
Then next policy, the town should adopt area structure plans for new residential development areas, providing detailed policies for the proposed development and subdivision design in undeveloped areas. So indicating that new residential development areas or areas like this estate residential should look at an area structure plan to actually design how that area should develop. And I'll show you shortly. As well.
Capture your voice a little bit.
Perfect, sorry. Thank you. So policy 5.5, this will be another example from that area. Light industrial uses in enclosed buildings may serve as a transitional area between residential and industrial land uses that may have nuisance potential. 5.9, to promote the development of safe, aesthetically pleasing industrial areas by providing adequate access and appropriate buffering and screening for adjacent uses. So how does that filter into the next?
Yeah, but just one thing. So as I understand what we call the Ballard Yard, the Atco Yard, or whatever, you put north of the lodge there. There is some services put in there.
Yeah.
So would that be the logical next place?
Not for industrial.
Not for industrial, no, I realize that.
Well, water, and that was the plan. I wasn't here. That was the plan that when they were here, that they got as much servicing as they can to that area. So there is water and sewer to that area. But I believe, I don't know what green is. I can't tell from here. Is it just, or that purple spot? don't know
Yeah,
if you
I
know.
think that's what it is right there, the rectangle.
What would that be zoned as?
Actually, kind of might have to look through the computer. I'm not sure if you can see that.
Something residential.
Possible annexation.
Is that what it said?
Yeah.
Hospital?
Because it was
Because that was
annexed.
annexed.
So that was prior to that.
So it is serviced, Mr. Mayor, so there's water, sewer there. Obviously, we have serviced residential land in Fielding Place. And I know council that time looked at Fielding Place area, and they looked across the street between the church and Argue Drive is another area for residential development, but I think the infrastructure costs for it in terms of needing a lift station and other things to develop in that area made the Fielding Place location more attractive to develop. But that area is there and has got services to the area.
And that's behind an industrial park. So that's,
You mean where the circle is there?
yes,
Okay,
is that not behind an industrial park?
Yeah.
This is here.
where the circle is, yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I just use this example because there is a good ASP map that just showed how they work together, so.
So it moved, it doesn't want to compare.
So here's what we call the Canada Grey Landing Area Structure. And yeah, this is right. So showing kind of how the NDP policies feed into, then a developer comes and wants to develop this property, and we want to see an area structure plan in place. They take direction from the policies above that. So the NDP indicated that it should be a state residential type of area, so you'll see that It's designed like acreage residential lots on the east side. We talked a bit about the policies in regard to separation of industrial. So you'll see in the ASP plans for light industrial expansion potential. So transitioning into light industrial prior to residential areas, as well as a 30-meter buffer between the residential and the industrial. Yeah, so just an example of how the policies.
So just for council's info, and I'm not saying that ASP is written in stone, etc. That was a concept. I think that was done. It was done before my time. I think that was done probably 2010, 11-ish, maybe even earlier, by the owner of the property. So the owner of the property was required to do an area structure plan. At that time, that was the vision of the owner of the property. So obviously, we know that nothing has happened there. That still remains vacant land. But in order to, if the developer wanted to develop something different than that, or the owner wanted to develop something different than that, we'd have to amend, create new area structure plans and go through that whole process again.
They want to create that area structure plan to ensure that whatever they're designing or wanting to build in that area aligns with the overall municipal development plans and the community's, I guess, vision.
And they'd have to repeal this one, right?
Yeah, if there was something completely different, then you'd maybe have to look at amending MGP because it's in that area.
Because they have to be standardized and work together.
And that's why
Oh, it's a great
It's
concept.
great. It's too bad they didn't go forward with
It's just, again, at the end of the day, it's money.
it, because those lots are huge.
That's the land the kids are bought from Link, right?
I believe so.
That part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when that was about 2012 or later after that when he bought it. And that plan came out.
Yeah, so essentially the ASP, it indicates a general subdivision design and land use districts that should be in place. It includes additional maps and policies outlining how the area will be accessed and service, proposed roadways, water and sewer servicing if it's not service. And then it guides subdivision and rezoning applications. So one of the major reasons for ASP is that when we have vacant areas like this, a lot of the times we'll get kind of the one-off subdivisions. The problem with that is as they keep occurring, you're affecting how the whole area can develop. So you're not necessarily considering, well, if I put a parcel here, I'm completely wrecking access for the remainder of the property. Or now, in order to service lots in behind, we're gonna have to put our servicing way further east and then back.
And these can be really challenging, especially if you have multiple owners who may not have the same vision for what they want their land to be used for. So it's a little easier when you've got one owner, but when you could have 3 owners of that parcel there, and they might all have different visions of how they want to move forward. So that's where, you want the ASP, because at the end of the day, you don't want one owner who's got a parcel to say, well, I want this to be industrial, I'm putting industrial here. And you want the other owner saying, well, I want this to be state acreages, and there's not a compatible fit there for them. So
that's it. Yeah. And one of the other things too, like we know that development happens out here as well. Like look at this ASP, for example, wasn't built out. Right? So one of the things that I'm trying to transition to with MDPs and ASPs is trying to create a little more flexibility within the documents, because we know maybe what was planned for then isn't necessarily what we're going to see in the future. And now if someone comes with an idea that maybe is logical for development out there, then we're going through the whole ASP process again. But is there a way that we can make it more flexible, still have ideas for how access servicing should work, but maybe we don't need to specify exactly that it has to be in a residential type or we don't have to show lot sizes to a T with like frontages and how long the lot should be. So just a little more flexibility, more like kind of lock and bubble funding. If that makes sense.
And a lot of ASPs, like they're not necessarily, we're absolutely gonna do this. It's more of like research. So to look at it and see how much is this gonna cost for servicing? Is this actually feasible? Like we're doing an area structure plan right now for special areas too, for an industrial area. And our big question is it reasonable for them to service these lots way out in the middle of nowhere? Is it possible? So sometimes you get to at the end of an ASP and you may adopt it, but it's just a research project to figure out if it's actually possible or not. So it's not always absolute. And maybe that's what happened here. Maybe the landowner by the end figured, this is just not, it's not feasible.
Well,
It's not economic.
Yeah, and that's the challenge right now, right? So for someone to say, I'm moving forward, I'm gonna develop that, for them to put in the water, sewer, natural gas, power, telephone, develop the road network, they'll have multi-million dollars invested in that. And they have to see a return on the other side. So they have to say, okay, there's 30 lots there. For me to even get my money back, I need to sell those lots for $200,000 each. Is that feasible? And that's where the rubber hits the road. So
In the big picture, is the town ever involved in that process? Because it would clearly be a benefit of 30 more taxpayers, which is a resource for the town. Those are people coming in who start businesses, who all sorts of.
Yeah.
Because even if they move from other places in town to them, someone will come in to where they live now, and it still increases the
So
population.
the town will get involved to the degree the town chooses to get involved.
Okay.
So an example I'll use, the most recent example I'll use is John Deere.
Yeah.
So the town spent about $50,000 of town dollars to bring the water line out to their property and to build the access road or the access off of Pioneer Trail into their property. So council of the day said, okay, we want them to be in our community. We want that there. We're prepared to pay the $250. We know we'll get that back over a number of years in taxes. So if the developer owner wanted the town to be involved in that component, then that's where there would be discussions and negotiations with council to see whether we do choose to get involved for the reasons you indicated.
Yes.
And to what degree.
That's right. Or even like cost sharing on services, right?
Yeah.
This is solely developer initiated. You're paying the cost to bring these services out there. Or is it kind of a joint initiative for the town? So servicing, because in the long run, it's an investment that ends up.
The challenges in communities that aren't seeing growth is then there's more emphasis put back on council to support and assist. If you're in a community that's growing rapidly, developer look at that and go, I know I can sell those 30 lots for $250,000 a lot. I'm just jumping right into it. The other thing we don't have that a lot of the other places will have too is, in addition to the hard cost of developing, they'll have to pay offsite levies.
That's right.
And the offsite levies can be very expensive, but offsite levies are basically, well, you're tying into the existing infrastructure system that's there, so you have to pay. We're in a different situation out here, and there's more. If that was to move ahead, I would guarantee that the owner would be coming to council to try and negotiate some
Shared.
financial assistance, because otherwise it's not economically feasible.
I just want to make sure that developers out there, and Hannah's certainly been attracted lately to that they know that the door's open to come and talk to us and make sure they know we're open for business.
Yeah.
We're open for business.
Yeah.
The fact that the coal mine is shutting down and other things have happened, we're still open for business. Just incredible talent here.
There's a
And-
marketing piece in there.
And that's what Harvest Sky is trying to
it's
do
been
for our
wonderful,
community too, so. But there, I also say there's emphasis, we have a role, but we also, I always say, if you're dealing with a strong owner or strong developer who understand the game and understand what their responsibilities are, their first approach is going to be to the municipality to say, I know I want to develop this, I know I'm gonna have to work with the town, that will be one of their first stops if they have an idea, so.
So if you have somebody that is coming into the area and is looking at this property, I know, I'm not planning on sharing it or whatever, but is interested in that property, could they come to the town and say, do you have any existing plans in place that have, like,
For sure, these
Can
are
that be- is
public
that- or is
documents,
it-
right?
okay.
Like, these are adopted by council by bylaw, so it's a bylaw showing how this area should develop over time. So
At the end of the day, though, we have to acknowledge that it is privately
private
owned
That's
property?
property.
Yeah, that it
So-
is owned by. And if the town were interested in doing some services, could it not be done in stages? Instead
Oh,
of doing the
yeah,
whole
for sure,
blast
yeah.
and doing everything,
Lots of
just do a little stage to maybe develop this, whatever, the
And-
small portion or that portion or whatever, and
I don't have a picture of it, but I'm pretty sure that this ASB has phasing within it. With
The only
document.
challenge, Counselor Bowden, it goes back to is a lot of your upfront costs, no matter if you're phasing it, are gonna be in the first phase.
oh, yeah, for sure, yeah.
So that's where the rubber hits the road, and that's where council has to be very cognizant, because if they say, okay, we're gonna spend $1 million on this, and we put the infrastructure in, and they build one lot,
Yeah,
they say, oh, they're not selling, we're gonna build it, you're not getting that money back.
yeah,
We
we're gonna
did
be
in
in.
Fielding
yeah,
Place, so.
same
But that was,
place
but
as
we own
Boulevards.
that, we're the
Yeah.
owner, that's our asset.
An example here in Devon, you haven't, it doesn't show it on your map, but directly north of the road of Palliser there. We, a couple of years ago, we okayed the expansion of 3
Into that.
acreages for Dale Kroll. In behind the 3 houses that are there.
Yeah, that's over,
It's
that's in
north of that
that's in
road
his property here.
Okay.
in there. And he's got it designed now for 6 acreages in there with the 3 on the road and the 3 above. But it won't get developed until water lines, sewer and roadway access gets put into it.
But that's the
Remember?
developer's
Yeah.
cost.
But that is up to him. He's a developer, so, you know.
But unfortunately, the cost of development is driving those opportunities away.
And that's where some councils will choose to share costs, but there
Yeah.
has to be, you have to make sure it's gonna have a positive outcome.
Yeah, and then, like I said, you can spend $1 million and they develop one lot and then they stop for whatever reason and.
Doesn't Bicycle have one of those? They have a playground.
Well,
and 2
Bicycle has
houses
the residential lot to the west. I
To
think
the
there's
west.
2 or 3 houses that have
And a
been built
playground,
there,
yeah.
but then nothing
Nothing.
has happened in the last 5 or 6 years there,
Yeah.
so I'm not sure who footed that bill in Bicycle, whether that was a municipal, a lot in the smaller towns, it's a municipally owned and operated development, or whether it was a private development, that one I don't know.
So an example would be, you guys are probably familiar with the new greenhouse outside of Acme. It's hard to miss
Oh,
if you drive
yes,
by.
yeah, on the north side, yeah.
Yeah, so on the north side of Acme, they're working on an area structure plan for that area. And it's a private developer, but the village of Acme knows that there's benefit to them in assisting with that, so they're jointly working on that.
So is that's village property on the north side of that road? Or is that?
No,
No, but
sorry.
I mean, it's in the village corporate
Yeah,
boundary,
so
or
it's
is it
actually
in
on the
the?
south side of the highway, the area, not the,
Not the greenhouse
greenhouse,
itself.
but
Greenhouse in the
because of the greenhouse, there's pressure for
Oh,
residential
okay.
development.
Oh,
So as a
yeah.
result of that, they're looking at developing the kind of
On the south
north,
side of there.
north boundary of that,
Okay.
on the south side of the
side.
greenhouse. Sorry, that's confusing.
The greenhouse itself is in.
Okay, that's what,
Yeah.
yeah, I've wondered that, so.
So that's an example where the village themselves is approaching the private landowner and saying, hey, because of this greenhouse, we have developers who are interested in starting to develop new residential subdivisions. Let's work together to create an area structure plan for your property, because it's going to benefit both of us, and then we'll bring it to
Those are good problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that. Good problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, decline it and have moved it then.
So from an area structure plan, what would the next steps be? So maybe change the slide too soon, but so from that design that we saw, a developer would come to us and say, okay, we're ready to subdivide these lots. So Palliser would then review the subdivision application in accordance with the ASP. Make sure that the lot designs, access, servicing, all of that gets put in place in the subdivision process itself. From there, we get to the development permit stage, and that's where the land use bylaw really comes into. So what is your land use bylaw? So the purpose of the land use bylaw is to regulate and control the use and development of land and buildings in a municipality. Land use bylaw is a non-statutory document. So it is adopted by bylaw, but it's not considered statutory. And this is so that certain standards can be varied. So for example, if your land use bylaw said your maximum building height is 25 feet and someone wanted to go 26, 27, 28 feet, we have the ability to vary that through the PC. It includes a higher level of detail than statutory plans. So where the statutory plan might say, okay, this area is residential, this is the general outline of the lot. The land use bylaw will say, well, if this is residential acre district, lot sizes have to be a minimum of 0.5 acres. They'll have like specific numbers put in place for those areas. So the way I look at it is that it's the tool for implementing the objectives and policies for planning documents. So your MDP and your ASP is your blueprint, and your land use bylaw is your toolbox, how you actually. And it's the main document used to assess specific details of development subdivision applications. So land use bylaw establishes the method of making decisions on development applications. So who are the authorities? What are the timeframes that need to be followed? Divides the municipality into districts, so general residential, retail, commercial, acreage, and prescribes the appropriate permitted and discretionary uses for each district. Creates development standards for the health and safety of residents and to meet objectives in planning documents, so such as setbacks, site coverage, keeping conflicting land uses separated. And then it also includes general land use regulations. So things like, what are the parking requirements?
Parking, and the big challenge that we have, and we'll be having discussions as we move forward with this land use bylaw review, will be signage.
Signage is always a big one.
Signage is, yeah, we've got a new David managing development, and we've had a couple signage requests come in, and we've had signs just appear with no development permit and placed in. And so David's saying, well, how do I enforce this when this is here? And so I basically said, just hold off right now. We will be doing this, but signage would be an excellent general land use regulations. And you know, whether signs are supposed to be 50 meters apart and this size, well, we could have a section in town where people have plunked 3 signs down in a 30-meter space.
So is that like for home-based businesses mostly or not?
No, a lot of them we have temporary, they're called temporary signs, but, and I'm not picking on Mr. Moore as an example, but Gary has numerous temporary signs, and they're supposed to be so far apart, but I notice on corner of Railway and Palliser the other day over a weekend, a new sign appeared on there that is a permanent sign. Well, permanent in the fact that it's in the ground with 4x4s, but no development permit taken out, no nothing. And it doesn't fit the distance between signs, and signs are a tough one because people want to promote or advertise their business or events or anything. And some people like the fact they see the information, but it's trying to find a balance between that and what's considered unesthetic and cluttering, et cetera. So there will be that's a perfect general land use regulation would be signage. Signage on buildings or stuff like that is pretty straightforward, but it's the freestanding or temporary signs that go along the roadways that are, difficult to deal with, so.
For sure, signs are a big one. We could probably spend a day or two alone just talking about signs.
Yeah, and then the implementation of people who have had that sign there for 30 years, and you say, well, that sign can't be there, and what their reaction is. So it's not a simple thing, but signage, as Devin said, we could spend days on what's appropriate and not appropriate.
That's it.
Drainage is also a
Stormwater.
consideration.
Yeah,
Stormwater.
That's another general land use regulation for sure. So yeah, then within each district of a land use bylaw, it's typically broken down into permitted uses or discretionary uses. And so a permitted use refers to those uses that will be allowed if all development standards are met. So the development officer cannot refuse to issue a development permit for permitted use when there are no relaxations or variances and all development standards are met. So these are considered to be uses that the community is most comfortable with for that type of area or district. And the landowner or developer can typically rely on being allowed to build a permitted use. So in a R1 residential district, if you apply for a single detached home and you've addressed
Your
parking
sides,
and your
Yeah.
side
sides, lot
yards and
coverage.
Can't be turned down.
drainage, then it has to be.
Yes.
On the discretionary use, so MPC makes decisions on all discretionary use applications. Discretionary uses are usually acceptable provided certain conditions are met. Decisions on these applications are usually made based on the merits of the application and the surrounding uses.
So I don't know, Devin, I don't want to spend a ton of time, but so as the example he has here is a residential acreage district. If somebody came in with one of those things and they met all the side yards and site coverage and everything, what automatically happens, there's no questions, it's dealt with administratively. If somebody comes in and wants to add a bed and breakfast establishment, that has to come back to MPC to review and make a decision, and even based on what conditions they are. So for me, sometimes, when we're going through this review, I'd like to see maybe us get away from as many discretionary and move some more discretionary into permitted, because I know I'm looking at Councilor Olson. I don't know if we've had a number of those over your last term, and I think they've all been approved.
Everyone.
I can't think that they haven't. So we haven't, again, had a real crazy one that didn't fit, but that's trying to think. And the other thing that I see from the land use bylaw review is just putting in more discretionary use items, because if it's not listed as a discretionary use and it comes to us, we basically have to do a land use bylaw amendment
In order to get it.
to have it added as a discretionary use to then be reviewed by MPC for approval. So one of the examples we talked about a little bit was SPCA. So there's no real solid definition for what the SPCA does in town or in terms of a land use. So if they wanted to go in any other district in town, it doesn't fit. There's no, so it'd be a change to the land use bylaw, which involves first reading, advertising, public hearing. So it's not a terrible thing, but it takes time to go through that.
So just hypothetically,
Yeah.
the second property I
Yeah.
co-own right now was a vet clinic.
Yeah.
So would that be still,
There is a veterinary use in there.
There is a
But
veterinary
it's-
definition, but does SPCA doesn't
Exactly.
necessarily fit that to a T. There's also I think a small pet animal care,
Yeah,
but the definition says no overnight.
that's it.
So,
This is a changing trend in
Yeah.
planning in general. And what we're trying to do is actually see if there's ways that we can simplify some of these uses and make them less specific. So some
Okay, good.
municipalities like them really specific. They want to be able to look at a use and say, yes, it's allowed, no, it's not, or we don't have it in here, because they want the bylaw to essentially tell them the rules. Some municipalities like it a little more general,
Yeah.
so maybe instead of saying a vet clinic or
animal
SPCA,
services.
it could say animal services, and that could include maybe boarding, a vet clinic, SPCA,
Pet
dog
store.
grooming, right? So these are the kind of things and the stuff that we look for council and administration for direction. Like, what way does your community want to go? Do you want to be maybe more restrictive, more open? Yeah, so these are all the types of the things we're talking about.
And I think being in a community that's looking for more development, my personal preference is we need to be
less
more open.
restrictive?
Or some will say, well, let's not focus so much on the use, but how it's built itself. So we're not so worried about what it is, but making sure that it's built properly to fit in the community. So for example, you look, discretionary uses include modular homes, but in my mind, the modular homes nowadays, could you even tell the difference from your normal single detached?
Well, an
home?
RTM or a modular home or?
That's right.
Well, the
So-
other interesting one too is even the manufactured home, which trailer. Our land use bylaw says that you can't, even if you're putting it in a zone for manufactured home, it can't be more than 10 years old.
That's right.
So we get lots of people who approach us and say, well, I'd like to move my trailer in on that lot, but it's 25 years old. We've said to everybody who's done that is, it's an option, but you have to, it's discretionary, so it has to go to NPC. So we would ask that they have their inspections, so everything's up to code. We'd ask for pictures, aesthetics, to make sure. And I struggle with that a little bit because I know in where we have manufactured home districts right now, all if not every single trailer is significantly older than 10 years old. So if somebody wanted to come in and replace a 30-year-old trailer with a 20-year-old trailer, to me, that's an upgrade, but it would still have to go through a process. So
one of the things that we've actually started changing for manufactured homes specifically is I like to take that 10-year, specific 10-year time frame out.
perfect.
And putting criteria for what it needs to meet. So it has to have inspections done. It has to have quality siding on it. It can't just be dilapidated trailer.
Yeah.
So it's not so much about what it is, it's about how it
Looks.
occurs and
Yeah.
looks in the community. So,
Okay.
and this
No,
is
that's
an
perfect,
extreme
'cause-
example, but for example, a lot of R1 districts probably wouldn't allow a manufactured home within it, but and I'm not saying that they should be, but in some instances, if you turn the trailer the right way and it's orientated rightly and maybe it has a sloped
It's road,
roof, would you even be able to
Yeah,
tell from
yeah,
the front,
yeah.
right? So it's an idea of switching, looking at less about the use itself, but more about the design.
Perfect, sorry.
Could you incorporate something like, we're looking at maybe a livestock hub in the future possibly, as far as adding something on there, like maybe a SPCA to maybe accommodate, additional services that facility could provide down the way.
Yeah.
And if you use it, great. If you don't, well, then it's already accounted for as a potential service that it would be an issue should it come up.
Yep,
down the line.
yeah, for sure. And that's where your guys' input is helpful too, with specific examples of that. Like you guys probably know better than we do what's everything that's going on in the community. So if we know some of the specific things that you're trying to achieve through these documents, we can help make that easier. So where does council's role fit into all this? So council's roles and responsibilities in regards to planning would be working with administration to ensure that statutory plans represent the goals and needs of the community prior to approval. Using statutory plans as a guide for decision. So if you got a good MTP that's up to date and representative of your views, have that with you at your council meeting and run into a tough conversation. Does your MTP provide? Approving new statutory plans and land use bylaws, approving amendments to statutory plans and land use bylaws. So again, for example, the fertilizer blending facility, that was an amendment to both the land use bylaw and MTP for an industrial use from commercial. So we brought that to council for your decision to say, does this represent the views of the community to have this type of use? Ensuring amendments are consistent with overall planning documents. So we would outline this in the presentation to council and provide a recommendation to council. And then council also delegates development and subdivision authority to administration.
So the question I have on that particular comment is right now we do development.
That's right.
So just so, but
Sorry, I put them together.
yeah, subdivision. So just so council's aware, and it's a little bit of it's worked out fine, but it has the potential to have issues is Palliser is our designated subdivision development or subdivision authority. So if somebody came to Hannah and wanted to subdivide a piece of land to do whatever, they go through Palliser. Palliser prepares the documents, they do their review, they send their letters to adjacent owners. They come back to MPC with basically their conditions or recommendations for approval. Generally, MPC here has agreed with those conditions, and we've passed a motion that we accept those conditions. But ultimately, if they had a condition in that we didn't want, or vice versa, we'd have to have a conversation about where we're at. But they ultimately have the authority to approve or deny any subdivision. Even if council wanted it, that subdivision happened, if Palliser, for in their purposes, had a reason not to, if they say no, they're not going to approve it, then that's the decision that's made. I guess the only other option then is if the person who applied and was turned down could go to the appeal board to register an appeal on that decision. So,
Or it could even be the other way where maybe we want to approve something and MPC maybe doesn't.
that's right. Yeah.
So essentially, we bring that application to your MPC just to make sure that the town is always informed on subdivisions that are occurring in your community. And the reason we do that too is to get your input and make sure that we're not approving something or denying something that maybe MPC would be supportive of. Where there is a potential issue is in a case where maybe there's a reason why Palliser can't approve it, and MPC has a different perspective on it, and Palliser doesn't want to take the, risk of approving it, but MPC has a disagreement. So we haven't ran into that in the town of Hannah, but we ran into it definitely a time or two before in other communities. So I think we might talk about that a little bit as part of the strategic plan too, and just how that whole dynamic works. And maybe it is better to just have MPC as the decision, like as the final sign off. And Palliser makes a recommendation, presents the application, outlines the conditions. And then you guys have that final approval authority of it. That's a possibility. Then on the flip side, we've also talked about completely taking that away from MPC because of the timeline that it adds to the process. So in order for us to bring a subdivision application to MPC, it expands the timeline, and that applicant or developer can sometimes not be so happy with that, right? So there's give or take, like there's maybe not the perfect scenario. Yeah, so we want to explore that a little bit more. through our
So
project as well.
MPC meets on a quarterly basis?
MPC meets when required.
When required?
So generally, we might have half a dozen meetings a year. It really depends on whether we have any subdivision requests or applications, or whether we have any requests for development that, for example, somebody wants to go into an area that's a discretionary use, that it has to come before MPC to approve. So it's as required, because if we set quarterly,
Yeah,
we might not have
clear
anything on
definition.
the agenda, and then we might have, and we generally, if something comes in from Palliser, we say, well, what's the time frame on that? And if there was something else, and it was, that they knew was coming down the road, we
Try to
could do
put it
two at one time. But generally, in the past, MPC's been fairly responsive and fairly quick. But it is a matter of getting 5 people together with different time schedules and getting it. And we were struggling a little bit at the end of last term, because we were down to 3 members. So we had to have all 3 attend. Now we've got a full complement of 5. So if 1 or 2 people can't make a date, we can still proceed. So.
And one of the ideas I've thought about a little bit too is maybe we have a hybrid approach to that. So for example, if it's a really simple subdivision application, it's a separation of title, there's nothing contentious. Palliser has the authority to
Yeah.
just approve that without even bringing it to MPC. Maybe I'll touch base with Kim, say, hey, Kim, am I okay to just sign off on this?
So like a checklist.
Yeah, that's right. But also having the ability for, if there is something
Yeah.
contentious, to have MPC as a subdivision authority as
Because
well.
we've had situations like that, and we've had an MPC meeting that's 5 minutes.
Like the golf course.
And even a golf course boundary adjustment with Paul's. Again, that's where bureaucracy gets in the way, and it's a long, convoluted process to do something that 2 parties want to move forward, but it takes a little bit more time, but.
So maybe a hybrid approach.
Yeah, no, that would be good.
Would be good. Yeah, so we've talked about, my next few slides, I think we've talked about all of them already, but your status of planning documents. So again, the MTP was adopted in 2014. We have a full replacement schedule for 2023. And then the land use bylaw created in 2012. It's been through 6 amendments on our records since 2012, and have a full replacement schedule for this year. Again, subdivision applications, so Palliser processes and presents subdivision applications to MPCs for final approval. I shouldn't say final.
Yeah,
approval, I
don't say
should
approval.
Final recommendation. Provide subdivision advice and guidance to town residents. We provide attendance, presentations, and recommendations at subdivision and development appeal board hearings. So if we approved an application and the applicants didn't like a condition on there, they can appeal that condition, and Palliser would go to SDAB on behalf of the town, make a presentation on our report, our conditions, and why we approved them.
Just go back there for a second, if you can. Cody, there was a question on that.
Not sure.
Yeah, I think you're there. Now I have to remember my
So
question.
this is the old John Deere's property, right? And-
Oh, that example is the old John Deere property
Yeah.
that Corag has subdivided a few acres out of. So one of the changes that Palliser's made fairly recently, I think, Devin, is the requirement on the subdivision applications to have a preliminary survey done.
That's right.
So I know I get a little bit of feedback on that. You probably get some feedback on it, and I understand your rationale for doing it. So what used to happen is somebody wanted to do a subdivision application, they would come in, do a fairly rudimentary sketch that I want to do this and here and here. Hauser would take that sketch, they'd go through the process, do all of this. And one of the conditions always is that you have and I don't know the right term, registered
Survey plan.
survey plan that can be registered with Alberta lands titles, acceptable to Alberta land titles, which means a survey. So that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of costs. So then the applicant goes, well, okay, I wanted to do this, but you say I have to get a surveyor now, it's $5,000 to
6 months.
to do this. And that's where it stopped. And you probably have a number of subdivision applications that didn't move forward. So then now they basically made the change that you have to have a preliminary survey done, which costs some money up front. And some people are balking at that. And you probably had a conversation with one of our residents lately about that, but.
So for me, the biggest reason why we made that change came down to actual legal issues that were potentially occurring when Palliser was the one creating the subdivision for herself. So this hasn't happened in the town, but within the past couple of years, I think I have like 10 different examples when I took this to the board. The biggest one was in special areas. So an applicant came to us to subdivide a piece of property. We drew out the plan in accordance with what they wanted, including the road access. Took it through the board and got approval for it, the special areas board. And then when it got to the final survey plan, the applicant came back and said, Palliser did this wrong. I don't want to do 30-meter access. And basically tried to say that we designed their subdivision incorrectly and they can't develop it this way, and it just turned into.
So that's good. So now an example I use is that when we went to do the golf course boundary adjustment, so that came into play. So surveyor had to be brought on right up front as part of the application to have that. So there was a cost there. I think it was $1,000, $1,200 for them to prepare the preliminary survey, but they were prepared to move forward and go ahead, and that was the rules, and I support that. But I know we've had a case, and Devin's probably heard about it, where someone had a subdivision or developed. Now, after the fact, we want to do some subdivision work, and it's been told, well, you need to have a preliminary survey done, and boy, you need to have a preliminary service done. I already got that, So I said, that's their rules. I said, you have to take that up with them. I support their rules, but that's the decision that Palliser's made, so.
The other thing too is that a tentative survey plan is pretty much a standard requirement across all of them.
Yeah.
Palliser is probably the only place who is still doing subdivision designs up front. And the reason Palliser started doing that was actually just sake of a typical farmstead separation of rural areas, a simple square boundary that we could draw up for the applicant. And that's how it started. But then over time, it kind of expanded into doing more complicated subdivisions.
So I just wanted to bring that up in case you hear from our residents.
But
in
isn't that
regards
a
to that.
requirement to buy land titles, that they have to have a?
So that's the thing, before it can be registered, they have to have a survey plan done anyways.
With all the
They need an
particular-
And I don't know,
Comes-
Kevin, I haven't talked to the surveyor. I don't know if they go out and they do their preliminary survey and they do their final survey and say one's $1,000 and one's $7,000, so it's an 8,000 survey, or versus they do one at the end and it's 8,000 there. Like, I don't know whether there's a big difference in cost.
It's not too big of a difference from what I understand. I think it really depends on the complication of the subdivision itself. And whether it's something that they can do a tentative plan, like there's lots of pins in place. Maybe they have AutoCAD drawings and they can do a tentative plan without even going out there. Or it's a more complicated area. There's no pins, they have no AutoCAD design. They have to get out there and actually do the tentative plan. So I think where applicants get concerned as well, I'm spending money up front and I don't know.
If it's gonna be approved or not.
Yeah, and then sometimes my response, which my thoughts is that, well, you should make sure that what you're applying for is consistent with the bylaw regulations and lot sizes. Because one of the other issues that we ran into is that we were being asked to design something that we knew wouldn't be approved. And then when we take that for approval and refuse it, they say, well, you designed it. So,
Okay, I just wanted, yeah, I just wanted to bring it up that that's kind of a change that's happened in the last year that's new in that process, so.
yeah, so in addition to subdivision, we provide general planning and development advice and assistance, so day-to-day advice on implementation of the local land use bylaws, statutory plans, available to provide advice and guidance to staff, council, residents on planning processes and applications. Plenty of staff available to attend an MPC meeting, so even if there isn't a subdivision on it, maybe there's a contentious development permit, you want us to attend, provide inputs, we're happy to do that. Same with SDAB hearings, public hearings, general council meetings as requested. Council meeting where maybe you're discussing the community development plan, for example, you want us to be present and just provide input. We're happy to attend.
So is that, sorry, is that a separate requisition that you would put in, or this is part of
This
the
is all
services that you
permits.
provide?
Yeah,
based
this
on what
is
we
correct.
pay them already?
That's
Okay.
and then we have a few things that are fee for service, so additional costs, which would be if you wanted to annex land, we can help with the annexation application, but we would typically charge just to cover staff time on that. Same with things like road closures or municipal environmental. Closures. And next big service is safety code administration. So Palliser provides the administration and processing of safety code permits. So we're accredited in building, electrical, gas, plumbing, and private sewage permits. Safety codes inspections are contracted to Superior Safety Codes. And actually in 2019, Palliser won the Alberta Safety Codes Council Accreditation Award for outstanding contribution, dedication of service to the Alberta Safety Code system. So I just put some stats up here for you guys through the year. So through 2017 to 2020, we processed around 60 permits for the town of Hannah. Then in 2021, there's actually a huge jump to 112 permits. We've seen that in most of our communities, and
COVID.
I attribute that to home
Home-based
projects, right? And home-based business.
Well, and I think the other thing, Cody, is, or Devin, is people are getting used to permits now, and it's getting to be more of a, I need to get a permit here, I need to get a permit here, and it's starting to get slowly build in. We still have people who will do work that nobody knows anything about it, but they should have a permit on, so. But I think it's just starting to become more second nature.
That's right. And then also your construction value from building permits. So there isn't much rhyme or reason to it. It really depends on, no rhyme or reason between the amount of permits and the construction value. It kind of depends on bigger projects or smaller projects.
But that would
Right.
include GFL in that.
Yeah.
2021, right? Or would that be under 2020? 2021.
Those are, but when you say, I don't know if that would
I
include
don't know.
them at all.
Yeah, I don't know if they
council
would have
vote,
been-
because they didn't have to, well, they did take out a building permit for their structure.
Right.
But they had to develop the lot.
Yeah, but that would have been,
A development.
Based on
For us.
Yeah.
and I
There'd be an
know,
electrical permit as well.
yeah, so they would have had permits for those disciplines only.
Okay.
So the value of the electrical permit, not the value of the whole construction project.
No, that's okay. I appreciate the questions and discussion. Yeah, so next service, I think this is my last slide before I let Cody talk. Our intermunicipal subdivision and development appeal board. So Palliser has recently developed our ISDB, working with our municipal membership. So there's Currently 17 out of 24 municipalities that joined. Palliser organizes and administers the regional ISDAB, and the ISDAB essentially creates a pool of trained SDAB members and clerks across the region for municipalities to draw from in the case of an appeal. So if someone appeals a development permit or a subdivision permit, the Municipal Government Act requires municipality to hold a subdivision and development appeal hearing. At that hearing, essentially board members would hear the appeal and make a determination on the application. What we found is that a lot of our communities were struggling to get members trained to either sit as a member or a clerk on ISDAB. So as Palliser, we pooled the resources of all our municipalities. So for example, Kim is one of our clerks on ISDAB. Councillor Campion, sorry, is a member as well, and we've sat on a couple of appeals now. I think one in Painter and one in the town of Drumheller. So yeah, just kind of regional cooperation and trying to help out across the region. So. Yeah, is there any further questions? I know we probably chatted a lot through the presentation, which is good. So I don't know how you guys are doing for time.
Well, we're behind time, but you guys are important. The other stuff on our agenda can either be pushed back, dealt with later. So definitely want to get through your guys, and we don't want to rush you guys.
Yeah,
So
sorry, I
it's not gonna be as
never-
long. No, it's been good. It's been great discussion and good information. Don't get me wrong.
I never know how long it's gonna be because some
Yeah.
councils have 0 questions and some have lots.
No, it's great information. So I don't worry about
It's either
that.
we listen to you or listen to Kim. So
Yeah. They don't like listening to me. So.
Yeah, they've had
Well, I don't think we had a presentation.
No, you guys haven't done this.
Last term either, I don't.
No, and when Devin reached out and basically said that they wanted to do these, that's what I said, we had the state plan, quite all. This is when we talk about information meetings, this is a perfect example how to use them, because you don't want to take this type of time in a regular council meeting. So, and it's more informal, and so this is a perfect value for those meetings. So.
I do have a question. Horizon used to be, can't just call it now. Harvest Sky, yes. Had a red tape report. You guys have gotten a copy of it.
Yes.
Is that going to be incorporated? Some of the suggestions in the.
Yeah, we've actually started to work on a lot of stuff, at least that's website focused. Some of the stuff we'd already been working on, and it was kind of part of our Palliser project.
Probably just reconfirm some stuff you were already aware of.
Yeah, for sure. So in reviewing that report, I thought there were some really good recommendations, and we've started working on a lot of it. Part of me also felt like some of it was the perception of Palliser versus the reality that we actually face day to day. So maybe the perception was that we are slower on subdivision applications because staff don't want to, or not wanting to help or provide assistance. But reality is that we have one subdivision planner who doesn't take vacation and works on the weekends just to try to get through all the applications for 24 municipalities. So like the recommendations are good in the sense that we need to improve that, but the reality of why that's occurring. Isn't.
And I think a lot of it was communication and educating the public as to what you do, what the steps are as far as going, because everyone is so quick to point and say, well, you're the problem. And they're not. It's just, if the education was there, then they would know upfront, and that some of those individuals need to take some ownership and do some homework before they approach guys.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
others as well.
And one of the things too, like subdivision in particular, it's a complicated process, like more so than a development permit. And sometimes applicants are very surprised to figure out how long and how much actually goes into subdivision application. And there's legislative timelines that we have to follow, like circulation periods. We have to give referral agencies 30 days to respond to circulations, like stuff that's out of our control.
Yeah.
There are things in our control that we can speed up, like trying to, after that circulation period, get things processed quicker, get a 10 PC quicker. So that maybe we don't need to get a time extension, so room for improvement, but then there's also things that we can't necessarily control.
Is that information on your website as far as
For sure.
an educational tool for the public so that they know it will take 30 days? You probably tell them that, but for them to, go through and remind themselves of the time frame.
There is subdivision information, and like our website is newer too within the past year, and we're constantly working on trying to just get more and more stuff on there. One of the things I'd like to see on there is not even look at the subdivision timeline from when Palliser touches it, but the time it takes you to prepare an application as well as after conditional approval, your time frame to meet conditions, and then even after endorsement, how long does it take for land titles to process that? Because there's a lot of stuff that happens both before and after Palliser that applicants are pretty surprised to see. Like land titles, for example, if you submit your survey plan to them to have them registered it, right now it's a 3-month wait for them to register it and send the title. So applicants are really surprised to hear that, and then when their subdivision ends up taking over a year, they say, Palliser, why did our subdivision take so long? So,
Okay, Cody, I think just for time, if you want to move on to GIS and
Sorry, I
don't
ran
rush
a
through
lot.
Cody. So usually do what.
Sure, yeah, I don't have a ton of material to go through, so feel free to jump in and ask questions. That's why we're here. It's a benefit to have us in person rather than on video, so jump in anytime you want. So I'm the GIS coordinator, and GIS is Geographical Information Systems, and it's just a way of mapping with information. And so you could think of, a map on a wall, you can see points, you can see lines and polygons, and that's about it. But when we're talking about computer mapping or GIS, we can have a point and then we can click on that point and we can see all attributes associated with it. So if you had a spreadsheet and you had all your properties in town, or fire hydrants, that's a better example, 1 through 200, and you look at the spreadsheet, for anybody who doesn't know the actual numbers of the fire hydrants, it'd be pretty hard to derive where it is and the meaning of it. So representing that information on a map is a lot more powerful. So then we can see the fire hydrant that's sitting right outside of the building here. We can click on it. We can see the make of it, the condition, and all of the information about it. So computer mapping or GIS is a lot more powerful than just our traditional maps that we print put on walls. So Palliser provides a public web map to the town of Hannah. And this is a place where anybody can go on and access landowners, and they can search for their property through a number of search tools, and they can view their property lines. They can make measurements in areas, they can measure the area, the distance, and they can kind of sketch out their own map. So for development permits, this is actually a pretty handy tool. If somebody's building a deck and they want to see if their deck size is going to fit within the requirements of the land use bylaw, they can kind of use this to generally sketch it out. It's not 100% accurate. So there's no, with property lines, I'd say about plus or minus 5 feet. So if you ever have a property owner who's having a dispute.
Cody, really?
Yeah.
I thought it was within centimeters.
That's what I was hoping for.
You just don't want to get yourself into a box.
This
5
is
feet.
exactly. Okay, so it has to do with aerial, when you're looking at aerial photos and you have an airplane flying over top of the town and they take a picture, if you look in the center of the aerial photo, that's where it's going to be most accurate. But as you go out to the edges of the aerial photo, you're going to get a little bit distortion. So I have to say plus or minus 5 feet, because in the areas with the most distortion, that's the difference, right? But
So
landowners,
we use this a lot internally, and it is public. Anyone can access it. It's just on their website. But if somebody comes in, because we'll get people who come in wanting to know where their property lines are. And for example, so we'll pull up the map for them, show them how to get there, but in a lot of cases, we'll pull up the map, print them a map, and they can use it similar to that, say, okay, the property line is right, yeah, that shed's right there, so it's pretty close to where it is. So it is a great tool.
Yeah.
I've used
I've
it.
used it a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's a
I
great
love
tool.
Kudos.
yeah,
It's
and as a smaller, well, you guys are one of the largest municipalities that we deal with, but still as a smaller municipality in Alberta, we're pretty fortunate to have such a sophisticated system, because if Hannah were to buy this on their own, it'd be very, very expensive. But the fact is, you're sharing the software across 24 municipalities, right? And then that's same with the aerial photos. These were flown in 2019, and they're very, very high resolution.
Do you know when they'd be doing another one? Is it- this one, I'm sorry, 20?
Whenever we get some more money.
Did you say 2019?
Yeah, 2019.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I think that was the ACP grant we used to buy aerials for that. And I'm always researching, different ways and cheaper ways to get aerials, and satellite imagery is becoming cheaper and cheaper all the time. So
Probably since it was flown in 2019, and I know you've got, and I don't know what word you guys use in terms of clarity,
Oh,
but,
pixels or?
but it's probably even better now. 3
Yeah.
years down, technology's just getting better and better all the time, so.
yeah, and eventually you won't need to hire a pilot in a plane to do flying. You'll be able to get the same resolution from satellite imagery. And I mean,
Sorry,
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, to do the urbans, for example, in 2019, I think the total bill was 130 to 140,000, so it's not a cheap
Yeah.
endeavor to do.
And there's, depending on how you've developed or what's changed, like, sometimes there's not that need to do it either. so.
Yeah, another thing that I've looked into is getting drone pilots to come out and image new areas. So if you got a new subdivision, got new buildings built, let's just image that area and add it to the map rather than re-imaging everything. So there's a various solutions to getting new imagery, and right now it's pretty darn new. So once we get into about 2024, maybe we'll start looking at it on a municipality by municipality basis. So, but most, I mean, these aerial photos are going to be relevant for quite some time. So then we have the public side or the private side of the web map, and that's where council staff can go in there and they can access information that they've created, or maybe your engineers have created, added on there. And this isn't available to the public. Any of these layers, if you wanted to make them available to the public, we could, but generally all infrastructure layers are all in-house and private. So on the left-hand side, you can see water hydrants and water lines are mapped on there. And a lot of this mapping came from MPE. So they've sent us the data and then we've uploaded it onto the web map. Other things that we mapped is just how Public Works delivers services. Maybe we use it to map out their garbage routes. And I know Hannah has, they have a private company that does that, but maybe another thing Hannah does is snow routes. So Raiden maps out what's been plowed or what streets are upcoming to be plowed. And then they use the web map to actually notify homeowners that your street's coming up to be plowed, or they have the ability to do that. So process is Public Works or somebody from municipality approaches me and says, we want to map out our snow routes. And I go, okay, what's the information that you want? And then we work together, we create a layer, we put it on the web map. So this is all customizable. Anything that you want to map in your municipality, we can do it. And we can find ways of tracking work and things like that. So along with the web map, as part of our services, we do training. So this is something that I push a lot of, because with the new web map, it gives the ability to the municipalities, to your staff, to edit, to create, to manage your own data, which is the way it has to be, because it's impossible for one person to manage the data for 24 municipalities. And because I don't live in every municipality, I don't necessarily understand everything about them, right? So it's important that staff are able to maintain their own data and work with it. So training is very important, and that we offer that for free. So if your staff want to get trained 10 times a year, I'll come here 10 times a year to keep updating them, training them on new tools. Because really that's how they're going to continue to utilize the web map and the tools that are available to them. Additionally, I talked about the custom layers, but new development to the web map, it's going to give you new tools. You can work with Palliser, and if I'm able to develop them myself, I will. If not, then we'll talk to our contractor and get them involved. And I kind of act as a mediator between you and the contractor to figure out
what do you want, how much it's gonna cost, is this a fair deal? And then we go ahead and do that, so that you're not just dealing directly with the contractor.
Can you zoom in further? Like, can it be utilized to sort of evaluate, say, roof quality or roof, whether or not it needs repairs?
I don't
or
think you'd
condition or
get
anything?
that
It would be from
clarity.
2019, yeah, I mean, let's say the community center, there was a big storm and there was. a
Sections
meter-
off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
meter sized chunk, sure, you'd be able to see
And
that,
then
but
you
it would
could
be from
measure-
2019 summer.
And you could measure the area, around like the square footage or something?
You could
from-
get,
Yeah.
you could
down
get
to
square footage of roofs.
Of an area that you outlined on
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, you could get a general square footage of the roof, but because of the angle. Yeah,
Rough
it would
area,
be
you could
rough,
get
but
it,
yeah,
that's very
for
good.
sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
Within 5
Or
feet.
for- Yeah, that's what I was trying to do, that was funny.
You're not gonna get, oops, you're not gonna get past
Yeah,
that.
like
right?
you could,
Like as far as if
Ten feet.
he's looking at a quote or an estimate as to how much space is required to get a contractor to come and do the repairs, does it give you that detail?
Yeah, so for example, if we look at the gym here, or the arena is a better example. You could just draw basically a polygon over top of the roof, and because this is generally a flat roof, you could get it pretty close, pretty accurate.
Okay, yeah,
to your
rough
square
enough to
footage,
give
for
them a
sure.
plus or
Yeah.
minus,
Yeah, exactly, that'd be a quick way of giving them.
so it
information.
can be utilized for that.
I actually had a fencing contractor use that exact software to do a quote up for the fencing around my yard.
Yeah, it's pretty
Okay.
easy. just
Yeah, he-
draw the
Yeah, I
line.
told him where I was, and it was like 10 minutes. He had how many feet and yada, yada, yada. Plus or minus 5, of course.
Actually, it'd be super accurate for property lines, because those are based on.
Yeah.
altimeter, right? Versus the aerial. photography.
Yeah, that's true, the lines would be a lot more accurate, for sure. Yeah, and this is an example here, I was working with Glenn and Kevin, and Kevin wanted to map out all the areas that they mow. And then this summer, hopefully what we'll do is we'll take this data and I'll just produce a wall map for them, and then he can show his summer students where the area is done.
Way to
Yeah.
go.
And he did a phenomenal job. Like most people will just like draw this big squiggly polygon over top, but he mapped it to an absolute T. It's really good. If I was doing that, I would not have the time to map it that closely.
especially that little green spot right by your mouse there.
Oh, yeah, on the
Community
left,
center
the
parking lot.
Yeah,
the
so
little
he-
circle.
He went around the trail, so it looks really good. And when it comes to your municipal development plan review, we're probably gonna take this layer and use it in a map that shows the green spaces in town. Where are they, how much are they, what's the area?
And you can identify slope in there, like say for the triplex.
No,
No, you need a digital elevation model, and we do have contours on the web map, and I think they're 10-meter intervals. And so if you're looking, let's say, a barren property, you can tell which way the water's gonna flow and slope. So the contours are actually pretty good. Those were purchased 10 years ago, so as long as the topography of a property has not been altered, it's gonna be accurate. So.
Thank you.
And so you can go to the web map, www.palliserservices.ca, or you can just Google Palliser Services, and go to our website, go to web map GIS services, and then there's a web map quick guide. So the public is calling me and they want some information on the web map or how to use it. I send them straight to the quick guide, and this is just a quick way of how to search for your property and find the information. So the public can also click on their property and see what zoning it is and other information like that. And then we also have, a web map demo video. So click on that, take you to YouTube, and shows you kind of all the tools that are at your fingertips and how to use them. So in addition to the web map, we have a mobile application, and that gives your public works the ability to go into the field without being connected to Wi-Fi or cellular networks. So work completely offline and see their infrastructure and update it, add, change it, collect information. And so I just did training with Wes Braden and Brent and showed them how to use it. So they're all kind of practicing using it and figuring it out as they go. But what Brent really wants it for is in the middle of
winter when they have a water line break, to be able to locate valves quickly. Because if the town goes ahead and purchases a GPS unit, it's going to give you a really accurate spot. As long as they've gone and mapped out where that valve is, then they can find it really quickly.
So yeah, that's one of the challenges in the winter. If you've got ice and snow, they'll know it's about here. But then you're then bringing in the steamer truck or whatever, trying to melt it so you can get to the valve. So if you have the ability to just go, okay, it's right here. And
So with the collection of those points, without the aerials, do you get sub-meter accuracy with just an iPad out there?
Yeah, with this, what's called the sub-meter GPS, you will get less than meter accuracy. And if you want anything better than that, that's when you gotta start purchasing base stations. And then you get into like survey grade equipment. So I think, and generally for what municipalities are using for, like just locating curb stops, water valves, a meter is good enough. But I always tell them, like, you might go in the field and your GPS has a glitch and it's not working, so let's use multiple tools. Let's use the GPS, let's have on the water valve, we click on it and we'll have a description there saying this water valve is north of the sidewalk by 5 meters. So if we have a problem with GPS, now we can use tape measure and we can find it. And then let's also go there with our metal locator. And so if you use all 3 of those tools, chances are you're going to be able to find it pretty quickly. So it's not a guaranteed solution, because if you have problems, you'll be able to find it. So let's use multiple tools. Yeah, this is just, I already talked to you about doing the tablet training. And this is the example I used for snow removal that Lori and Braden have been working on, just mapping out where is at what point are we in the snow removal process. So although you have access to your own individual web map, it's hosted on a server that contains mapping for all of our municipalities. And that's where the cost sharing aspect comes in. We already talked about that. You know, it'd be a very expensive endeavor for Hannah to own her own web map. Right now, the way it works is every municipality has their own data, like special areas and concert, better than ON. They have data. They hired somebody to go through with a GPS unit and collect all their infrastructure data about 10 years ago. So that's in one format. And then your data has come from MP, and that's in one format. And then Acme's is from Urban Systems. So we have data across the whole of the region, but they're in different formats and they don't mesh together. So then we have municipalities who are all working independently towards the same goal, and that's not very cost effective. So one thing we're doing is we're standardizing all the data. So no matter where it comes from, it's going to go into one format on the web map. And what that gives us the ability to do is when we're developing tools to work with this data, we can purchase, or we can spend the development money on one tool that applies to everybody. So if everybody's got different data, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of having a group web map. So that's what we're working towards right now. We're using grant money from FCM to do that, because a bulk of the cost was to actually create the standardized model. And now that it's done, it's relatively cheap to convert everybody's data. So 8 municipalities who applied for this grant out of the group project, you guys are actually going to benefit from that.
Well, we just got approved too, so.
Yeah. And grant applications too. So I'm always looking for money from the province and from the federal government of where can we get money that will further develop the web map. And you know, investing in technology is very expensive, and typically the government doesn't want to give $50,000 to one village or one town to invest in technology. They want to see that it's working for a large group of people. And it makes it a lot more attractive as an investment, right? This, you know, I look back in the history of Palliser, and there's so many projects where, you know, municipalities spent money on a software system and it just fell off. People stopped using it. It became irrelevant or came out of date, and it's just it's just wasted money essentially. So having it spread out across many more municipalities, it doesn't guarantee that it's going to continue to be used, but it definitely improves it, right?
So the rural non-member, so all of Nehill and Wheatland County are not on it, but the little villages and towns within it
Yeah,
are.
yeah, correct. So Rockford Center.
So is it one of those like a flat earth society? There's a wall? Right
Yeah,
there, isn't
well,
it?
yeah, if you zoom into Hazar, you can see the roads in Wheatland County, but
Yeah.
obviously we don't have any data for them.
They have their own.
They have their own system.
Yeah, they're actually, Wheatland County is working with the same company now, NRF, which is good because I'm also working with Wheatland Regional Corporation, which is a water line between Standard, Legion, and Hazard. So now we can share information between Wheatland County and WRC, which is great.
That's all.
So through the web map, we provide civic addressing on there, but civic addressing is a whole nother issue in itself because it needs to be provided to emergency services, to Alberta 911 or Alberta One Call, and all these agencies in Alberta need this data in order to perform work, right? So I'm working with Winona right now to do a civic address review, which hasn't been done in probably 4 or 5 years. So typically what should happen is there's a new address created in town of Hannah. Somebody emails me, tells me this is a new address, and I make the change and it gets applied to AMDSP. And AMDSP is a website where anybody can go and download the civic address data.
Does that account for a change in ownership as well?
No, that's through the province, and I download that from Altus every 3 months.
Okay, so if somebody buys a new property, it shows that new individual.
Yeah,
Every 3 months.
In 2 months.
Yeah, that's
And
the
then-
one titles, when the title gets updated, then there's called Altalist. Work on that.
Okay.
But essentially Altalist compiles all that information and that's where we tell. So that has that.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you bought a house tomorrow, got your name on the title, I would say between probably 6-month delay between your name being put on that property on the web map, because it's got to go through the lawyers, through the province, through land titles. They've got to change their data. I've got to download. I've got to upload it.
So if
So
you have a wreck, you're in a new.
But
house,
remember,
you have a
that's
wreck.
not public information.
yeah, that's a good point. That's only available to staff as landowners.
Yes,
Staff.
but as far as emergency services is what I was concerned
Oh,
about.
yeah, emergency services, they don't look, they
It's
don't
just
have a
the address.
database that contains names.
It's just the address.
Yeah, just address, just location for sure. Yeah. So yeah, basically the civic address data for Hannah is, that's why we're doing such a big project of going through and reviewing every single address, making sure it's correct. And then from that point on, it just has to email me, this is a change, or this is a new house being built. I can make the change in about 2 minutes, upload to the website, and I believe within 48 hours, that data will be in an ambulance. That's the whole purpose of this process, is quick changes.
And that's just to associate that building with that address.
Yeah,
Not-
exactly.
Or if there's 2 or 3 suites, has that been,
Yeah, we're doing.
unless they actually subdivided the suites, that wouldn't show.
Yeah,
correct?
so with civic addressing, we don't actually care about the property lines, we just care about the dwellings. So for example, if there's a restaurant owner that lives in the back, I want to put 2 addresses there. I want one in the front for the business and one in the back for the house. And same with fourplexes, even though it's on one property title. The way I'm doing it is an address at every single door, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, whatever. So we're making sure that every person has their own individual dwelling, has their own civic address. So that they call, emergency services can come directly to the door.
Thank you.
So it's a big project because we have to do this with every single municipality, but we has one that I'm working on right now, so hopefully we'll have that done by the springtime. So we're talking about AMDSP. I'm kind of already went through the flow of information. Municipality talks to me, I make the change, it goes to amdsp.com, and then any organization in the province can go there and consume the data. And if we weren't using AMDSP, then all these organizations would be owning candidate data. So it kind of creates that buffer between you and the agencies, and it's a lot faster process. And so I'm the representative for HANA on AMDSP, and we pay a fee for every municipality to be a part of that every year. And we're always talking about new technologies and NG 911 and different things that are coming down the pipeline and making sure that you guys are prepared for that. So if you guys,
And then you add in issues like Google Maps and Apple Maps, which aren't connected into this at all.
yeah,
And that's a whole new nightmare. to fight with right
Yeah.
there.
exactly.
If they don't recognize Hannah, it goes to Drumheller. It's
Yeah,
hard to get a cell phone because they show up in a house in Drumheller and say, you're not there. Because Google
Yeah.
Earth and Google Maps is wrong.
and
I've been trying for 3 years to fix it for my
Yeah.
address.
and they update whenever they update, and it's damn near impossible to get hold of them. And the problem is like lots of delivery companies, like they use Google Maps, right? So we might update our data every week. Google Maps might do it every couple of years, right?
And then Apple Maps is completely different again.
Don't use
Is
Apple Maps.
But I'm just saying,
It's
it's
garbage.
not a one-stop
But yeah,
shop
you're
for
right,
all of
it's even worse, right? So after I'm done the civic address review for all the municipalities, I'm gonna try and get in contact with somebody at Google and say, hey, you can do a bulk upload of Alberta, and there's gonna be major changes in this area. And maybe they'll listen, maybe not. I'll see if I can get a hold of somebody.
We just call Google.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cody here.
Yeah, we'll see how that works. Have you guys heard about NG 911, new generation 911, and how the presentations are?
I've
So,
sat in on a few webinars.
yeah. Perfect. So, it's a whole new system for calling into emergency services, because what Alberta has now is quite out of date. It's analog. And so they have problems with a large volume of callers. They have problems with locating people. And they're switching to a going to be primarily based off of cell phones. So instead of, they're going to do a combination of you call, you give them their address, they look up the address, but at the same time, it's going to be pinning the location on the phone. So it's going to be a lot more accurate. But with this change, that data that I upload to AMDSP, the structure of it is going to change. And we're not really sure what that looks like yet, but that's why I'm continually attending meetings with NG 911 and working with AMDSP to make sure that you guys are ready for NG 911 when it comes in place, because there's going to be a huge responsibility on the municipalities to make some changes with their data to make sure it's ready to go. So we're constantly, and that's not to say that there won't be requirements outside of Palace's responsibility that the town is going to have to do to prepare for NG 911, but in terms of the road data, the place data, and the civic addresses, we're going to make sure that that's handled. And then any questions? Perfect, thank you.
Thank you guys.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, one question I was gonna ask, have you got any plans for SADB training coming up for anybody,
For
or?
more training. We just did SDA training on December 3rd, so right before Christmas.
Oh, you just trained some?
But there's always, the province always has different training sessions available. Same with Brownlee, they have sessions that they put on probably once a month that anyone could join, so.
The question, the challenge you get, I know Devin, you just had some more people trained is because there's not a ton of, fortunately, there's not a ton of those. There's no use having 60 people trained, because you might only get to do a sit down on an SDAB once every 5 years there. And then you've lost your understanding, your knowledge. So it's a fine line of finding enough that you have the flexibility that if you had to call, you can get a panel together quickly without having too many that some people don't
We'll never
call.
ever get a call.
The one thing I'm finding, Kim, though, is a lot of the times I call and Again, it's, well, I'm kind of busy that day.
Yeah.
And stuff like that sometimes too, or actually the county of Painter appeal was interesting because Gerald, there was 2 appeals. He sat on the first one.
Yeah.
So when the second one occurred, everyone that sat on that
Is it
original
eligible?
board is ineligible.
Yeah.
But then all of my representatives from Painter that were trained had some sort of relations to the appellants. Then everyone else I called wasn't available, so I ended up that we had to have a special board meeting to appoint new reps just for that one hearing.
But you had Drum just joined, correct?
That's
And
right.
they brought some trained members
Yeah,
too?
that's right, yeah. So, no, we're pretty good right now. After the special board meeting, we have quite a few trained members now, so. But I mean, if people are interested in joining, like I'm never
Yeah.
opposed if someone is interested. Actually, it's the people who are interested in reaching out that are the ones that I usually like to choose for the appeals. Because they are the most attentive, I would say, versus those who are just got told to do.
Appointed.
Yeah.
Voluntold.
Voluntold, yeah.
Yeah, so those that are actually interested to be a part of it, yeah, those are the ones I like to reach out to. So,
Yeah, the reason I asked Devin is because our training is only good for 2 years, is it not?
3 years.
3 years?
Yeah.
And then we got up good.
Well, then you get recertified.
Yeah.
What was the date of your training? Do you know?
February, was not, we took it in the middle of
Probably
February.
been, it was in
Just a year.
COVID time, so
So
it's
2
in the
years.
last,
2 years.
I think I
No,
have
just a year
I'm
ago.
I'm guessing we're around a year-ish,
Okay.
somewhere in
Yeah.
there. Since we took the training, so we had Council Campy and myself and Todd Wallace took it at that point in time.
And I think I'm gonna try to structure it as I'll organize a training once a year.
Yeah.
And now that that's in place, it's every year I have people that
Yeah.
are need training again, so
Either new or recertified.
that's right. So,
Okay, that's what I asked. Thanks, Deb.
and yeah, then there's, the province always has training available.
Yes.
too, if someone wants to.
Okay, recommend a motion that council thanks Devin and Cody from Palliser Regional Municipal Services for their presentation today. Councilor Warwick. All in favor? Carried. This guys are really
Yeah,
good.
no, thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, yeah.
Appreciate it.
Everyone was good.
Information.
Yeah, if you guys want us to attend any council meetings, yeah, we're happy.
We'll come
to.
every time.
Yeah.
Bring donuts next time, Lord.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm trying to be cognizant of time. So I'm not sure where everybody is time-wise. What I would suggest is I can provide an update to my report very quickly, and maybe the business item on council honorarium we postpone till the February council meeting.
Okay,
If that's good with
that's
council.
fine. Anyone else? Problems? No, it's good.
So mine, I just wanna, you guys are probably as much in the loop as me in terms of this Seymour. I haven't been by it for a few days, but they should be wrapping up here shortly, and then we'll try and get some fill in and complete it and get it off the road. And the only thing we'll be waiting for cost-wise then will just be the cost of the landfill. We've got one bill in. That'll be the only unknown to complete the project. So it's moving along quite well. So, and I just wanted to spend a second on the Alberta Provincial Police Force consultations, just to make sure everybody's on the same page or has the understanding. So, as you are aware, the province undertook a study of forming a provincial police force. Depending on who you talk to, it looks like they're pushing the Alberta Provincial Police Force. They do talk about having a referendum to decide, but it appears that the province is pushing that provincial police force is the way they want to go, and whether that's the right decision or not, I don't know. But so they are doing some consultations. So the provincial one is in Hannah, February 9th at 2:00. So that'll be one at the community center. So that'll be one that is led by the province. it will probably have a different slant than the one on February 1st. So there is one next Tuesday at 2 o'clock at the community center, and that one's put on by the National Police Federation, which is the RCMP union. So it will probably have a different slant in terms of wanting to retain their time
It's been
here.
very entertaining, for lack of a better, the emails that have been.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure you're aware there's those two events. Coincidentally, they're both at 2 o'clock.
I thought the 9th one was at 6 p.m.
No,
I think you better check on that.
okay, I thought I looked at it. I thought it was
I
at 2
wrote down the
o'clock, too.
planner at 6 p.m.
Okay,
The one tonight online, streaming at 6:30.
No, the one
From where?
February 9th.
yeah, they're
You have to
doing,
register
An
for
email
it?
I
I
had.
think they're
you
doing
had to
70 some.
Yeah, they're just-
And it
Oh,
was,
So,
you had to register and it was 6 p.m.
okay, I'll double check. I thought it was 2, so.
Okay, well,
So
I
how
wrote
does that
9
work?
down
with-
there.
'cause You guys have already signed a contract with the RCMP, have you not?
We don't have a contract with the RCMP. We're, because of our
Less than
size,
5,000.
we're under 5,000, so we're automatically lumped in. And so the RCMP have a contract in Alberta because we're small municipality, we're part of that contract, so. And the interesting part in it is just timing, you know, I know that AUMA did a webinar the other night on it, and you'll see this as you move forward, so there, even when the decision is made, by the time the RCMP are transitioned, if they go to about a provincial police force, is 2027 or 2028 or something like that,
Could be two
so.
different governments by then.
Oh, yeah, and that's the problem.
Well, and the amount of
Yeah.
money that's gonna be
I have
lost
nothing.
from the federal portion is
You
gonna
have
be
to
huge.
register for it and
Is it
event rate.
150 million?
You can register there, it's like I said, there's 70 of them
There
on,
is, there's
so.
a ton, even if you go to their the website, RCMP Alberta.
Yeah,
they'll-
so I just wanted to make sure you're aware of those dates, and we're fortunate, we've got 2 of them, and both of them in Hannah, so. We can go there, I'll clarify the time and get back, I thought it was 2 o'clock. Both of them at 2 o'clock, so,
Excuse me.
I think you registered me, did you?
could have,
I
yeah,
think you registered for the 9th.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what I have written down here.
Can you please share those dates and times, and can we share that publicly? Can we, or is that?
Yeah.
Can those be, can you send them, those dates and times to us, and so we can share that publicly?
so how do you want it shared?
Just in an email,
Okay,
so that we
It could-
can,
It could also be shared on Facebook.
or
Well,
however.
I think that, I know the RCMP one has paid ads on
Okay.
Facebook
Yeah.
that.
There are a few.
And I don't know if
areas.
I don't know Facebook well enough if we're able to share a paid ad,
Well, I think so, yeah.
but they've paid ads, so I know it's come up in my Facebook feed. I've seen the ones there, so,
Yeah, I think I'll share.
okay, yeah, I'll confirm those dates and times for both of them and send them to you, so. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor, and then to get you out of here, so you're not occupying your whole day here. We'll add the other one to the next meeting and move from there, and we have our council meeting on the 8th.
Do you need a motion for your?
No.
Adjournment then at 12:08.
I'll give you that.
You don't have to.
You don't have to. Thanks, buddy.
So thank you for your time. Sorry it's a long day, but I think good stuff, so,
Yeah. very informative.
Yeah.
Very-
yeah. So.
And thank you, Angie and Dan, for reminding